changes to rules around emergency shelters and who gets priority housing, and it's not migrants. Some worry the move could put homeless families and children on the streets, while the governor says they're far from abandoning the only statewide right to shelter law in the country. We'll open phone and text lines to get your thoughts on how our leaders are handling this influx of migrants and shelter seekers.
I'm Andrea Cabral, in for Jim Browdy. Then it's GBH Executive Arts Editor and host of The Culture Show, Jared Bowen, on the latest must-see art exhibits perfect for a summer afternoon, including a giant plastic rooster sculpture on view in New Bedford. Jared will also help us make sense, no pun intended, of a new exhibit at Mass Art that's incorporating smells into more traditional contemporary works. It's all ahead on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. FBI Director Christopher Wray is testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. Lawmakers are questioning him about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Wray says the FBI has recovered 8 cartridges from the scene. Lawmakers have asked why the shooter was able to fire so much. Wray says he understands the public's keen interest in the probe.
There's a whole lot of work underway and still a lot of work to do, and our understanding of what happened and why will continue to evolve, but we're going to leave no stone unturned. The shooter may be deceased, but the FBI's investigation is very much ongoing.
Wray also says the shooter flew a drone above the Trump rally seen earlier that afternoon. Further, he had 2 explosive devices in his car and a detonator in his pocket, but Wray says investigators think the shooter was too far away to set them off. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address Congress this afternoon amid the war against Hamas in Gaza. A new report from Gaza's health ministry finds Israeli airstrikes, shelling, and gunfire have killed or wounded around 6% of Gaza's population. NPR's Aya Batrawi reports.
Gaza's health ministry says more than 39,000 Palestinians have been killed and 90,000 wounded since the war began October 7th, when Hamas militants attacked Israel, killing around 1,200 people there and taking hostages. In a 532-page document published today, the health ministry says that as of June 30th, it had identified more than 9,300 children killed by Israel's military in Gaza during the war. Children account for roughly 33% of bodies identified, while women account for almost 20%. The health ministry data does not give a breakdown for the number of militants killed. Israel says it's killed thousands. The death toll also doesn't include the estimated thousands of people crushed under the rubble of airstrikes or people who've perished from disease and malnutrition in Gaza. Aya Batrawi, NPR News.
Many black voters are encouraged by the prospect of Kamala Harris becoming the nation's next president. NPR's Alana Wise reports on efforts to mobilize their support for Harris.
When President Biden announced Vice President Kamala Harris as his choice to succeed him, it marked a historic moment. Not only would Harris be our first female president, she would also be the first South Asian and second black person to hold the role. On Sunday, organizers with the group Win for Black Women say more than 44,000 joined a Zoom call to discuss how best to support Harris in her run. The next day, some 53,000 black men joined a similar call to action on the video sharing platform. Harris has already raised more than $100 million, shattering records. Members of the prestigious black sororities and fraternities known collectively as the Divine Nine have pledged to help see her elected. Alana Wise, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. GE Vernova, the company that built the Vineyard Wind turbine that broke apart earlier this month, cites a manufacturing deviation at a factory in Canada as the cause of that broken blade and vowed to reinspect all 150 blades produced at that plant. Vernova's leadership team made the announcement today, and it comes during the company's second quarter earnings conference call with investors, after debris from the blade began washing up on Nantucket's South Shore beaches 2 days later. The Vineyard Wind project was shut down by the federal government, and the company continues to investigate the cause of that incident. Officials at TD Bank say they're closing several branches in Massachusetts this fall. A statement released this week says that TD Bank regularly evaluates its physical store network and looks for opportunities to better align its networks of banks to best serve its customers through an optimal mix of convenient TD Bank locations. As part of that process, TD Bank has decided to close 7 Massachusetts locations on September 20th. They include Boston MGH on 250 Cambridge Street, the Post Office Square Bank, Route 6A in Brewster, Burlington on District Ave, Lexington on Lowell Street, Belmont on Trapello Road, and in Pocasset at Landing Road. The chain also plans to open a new bank office in Nubian Square next year. Red Sox wrap up their series with the Rockies this afternoon. Then it's back to Boston for a weekend series with the Yankees. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their travel card, Venture. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation at rwjf.org.
Welcome to Boston Public Radio. Andrea Cabral is in for Jim Browdy today. Hello, Andrea.
Hello, Marjorie.
I am Marjorie Egan, of course. She just said my name over there, Andrea did. We're at the Boston Public Library broadcasting today. We're going to be back here again on Friday with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner with us. And we are streaming live from 11 to 2 today, as we do every day not every day, the days with the library, which are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at youtube.com/GBH News. So yesterday, Governor Maura Healey announced these sweeping changes to how the state's going to respond to its influx of people seeking emergency shelter here. It's a pretty dramatic departure from the state's right to shelter law that has been in place since 1986. What she's done sharply limits assistance to people who use emergency shelters and prioritizes needy Massachusetts families over migrants for longer-term placements. So as of August 1st, stays in these so-called overflow shelters will be limited for 5 days, which is not that long, with no option to renew. Chelsea, Lexington, Cambridge, and Norfolk shelters currently allow for 30 days with options to reapply. That's going to change. There will be not the option to renew. And families staying at overflow shelters will be eligible to be flown out of Massachusetts. The state will pay for you to get out of town, or you can apply for rent subsidies. The new rules also prioritize families who've been evicted through no fault of their own, like through a natural disaster such as a flood or fire, as well as families with a veteran in the family. 5 days in a shelter, though, is not really enough time for a migrant family to obtain authorizations to let them work and pay for their own housing. But meanwhile, the cost to run the emergency shelter system at the start of this fiscal year, $915 million, which is a lot of money. So we're going to open the lines to you. Immigration and fights over immigration have become huge issues in this election, and they're pretty significant issues here in Massachusetts. So how do you feel about what the governor's done? Do you want to prioritize Massachusetts residents over migrants who come here from other countries? If not, and you want to accommodate those migrants as well, and they have been coming in record numbers to Massachusetts, how much are you willing to spend of your tax dollars about that $915 million? And how much does the immigration crisis, and it is a crisis, factor into your voting record? It's gone down somewhat at the border now with Biden's new rules that he put in regarding asylum. And as most people probably know, there was a bipartisan agreement reached on the border back a while ago. The Republicans and the Democrats were there. It was a tough new crackdown on the border, but Donald Trump didn't want that bill to happen because he wanted things to look bad for Joe Biden. So it kind of questions the former president's sincerity about the immigration issue. But anyway, we're talking about immigration there, but we're mostly talking about this new issue in Massachusetts. We have a right to shelter law. We're supposed to be very compassionate. How compassionate do you feel this is, and what should we be doing? Do you want to weigh on this before we discuss it with listeners, or what do you think, Andrea?
I just want to give some other numbers so that we have context for this. We have the right to, we may be the only state, but we're one of very, very, very few
I think we are the only state.
Yeah, that have a right to shelter law, and that's where they started, and that was the law that was started really by Governor Dukakis, promising emergency shelter, and it's only for families. Earlier...
That's when we used to be so shocked by homeless people on the streets,
right,
remember?
Right, now we're completely inured to it. So earlier, Governor Healy had put some limitations. We reached capacity, which is 7,500. I mean, she put a limit on it. 7,500 is the current capacity, but we were headed to be over that. So that was among the first limitations that she put in place. But just so that people know, Marjorie just described what the changes mean. Prior to this, you could stay in an overflow shelter for up to 30 days. You could stay in a long-term shelter up to 9 months consecutively, and that sort of implies that, at the 10th month, you might have to leave after 9 months, but there was this sort of promise that you could come back. I'm not at all sure that now it's been limited to much less than 9 months, and the likelihood that people are going to be able to come back is probably minuscule at this point. So there have been a series of restrictions put on our ability to house homeless people. And I think that the governor has done that in response to this overwhelming number of people that we're dealing with.
Let me get the number. 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text and to tell us how you feel about immigration in general and immigration here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, what we should be doing because we don't have a lot of room. We're basically full is what this is the essence of what the governor is saying, and she's moving people out. Do you think that's right or wrong? 877-301-8970. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Andrea.
No, I was just going to say, if people have sort of suggestions for ways to house people. I mean, one of the things we were talking about the talker earlier, one of the things I was thinking about is, I know from my time in government that the state of Massachusetts owns a ton of property around the state that isn't necessarily being used, right? Previously, state-owned buildings that haven't been repurposed, that have long since, been abandoned. I suggested treating the two issues differently. Now, I understand that you don't want to exclude migrants from the right to shelter law. But one of the criteria under the right to shelter law is residency in Massachusetts, and I'm not sure how that's established. I think we've certainly brought migrant families quite justifiably under the rubric of right to shelter, but the criteria requires residency, that perhaps you try to treat migrants, even if it's just at the point where there's a huge influx of them, separately, and you deal with that shelter situation differently than you deal with the right to shelter for homeless families in Massachusetts, where you can easily prioritize veterans, people who are fleeing domestic violence, and any one of the number of other categories that have been subsequently prioritized. But, I haven't thought the entire thing through, but it does demand a thoughtful solution.
Well, I mean, as I said before, this has become a huge issue in the election. There has been a massive influx of people coming here from other countries. It's going to get worse because of climate migration. So this is a big problem. But I think there's a lot of poverty right here in Massachusetts.
Right.
There is a massive wait for getting into public housing in Massachusetts. So I think if you are really struggling financially, it's hard for you to reconcile why am I still struggling and why is somebody who just came here from wherever it was getting a place to live. And churches can do more. I suppose you can open up churches. We had people living at Logan Airport. That was not a suitable place to live, but there were bathrooms there. So I guess it's the bottom line is, how much do you want to spend?
But that's why I'm saying deal with them separately, because this is an immigration problem. It becomes a homelessness problem in Massachusetts and in any one of the other states where people come here and there's no place for them to stay because there's just no room. But this is really, and I understand the Massachusetts inclination. We do want to give people housing. We do want to shelter people, and we want to remain true to that. But this is more of an immigration problem than it is it's certainly not a homegrown Massachusetts homeless problem.
877-301-8970 is the number. Are you pleased that the governor is prioritizing Massachusetts residents over people that come here from other countries? What is the long-term solution to the migrant crisis and people coming here? How much do you want to spend? And do you think it's outrageous that migrants may be on the streets because there's no place for them to go? Michael Michael is homeless, so you are a great person to talk to about this. What do you think, Michael?
Hi, Michael.
Well, I grew up in Massachusetts, and I came back here after a number of years. And where can I go? I got nowhere to go. I can't even go to a hotel. The Red Roof Inn is $150 a night. Why? Because we're housing immigrants in hotels. This is the hotel owners' graft. They're controlling the legislature and stealing our tax dollars to house these homeless people. Do the math. We're spending $1 billion a year to house only a few thousand people in terrible housing. I believe we can buy them all a house instead if we had a place to put it. Add on this the Supreme Court ruling that says we don't need there's
You
no
can be
place
arrested.
to be.
Yeah, you can be arrested, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Criminalizing
right.
Yeah.
homelessness.
And another way, one extra comment is we're also inured from the homeless situation because a lot of it is moved into cars. You go through parking lots like Walmart, actually more in other states than Massachusetts, which is more strict. But many people are just living in their cars. We don't see them out on the street.
Michael, where are you putting your head at night?
In my car.
In your car. You're living in your car in a parking lot?
And I'm not even going to say it because that'll give away our spots. The cops will be knocking on our doors.
And
Have you? I was just going to ask if you had previously been in any of the shelters.
It's crazy. There's never a spot in a shelter.
Yeah.
And it's not exactly a great place to stay, frankly. I wish I could put my tent up somewhere in a state park.
Michael, one last question. How did you lose your housing? Has this been a chronic thing, or is this something that recent, or what happened?
I work in a very variable. Sometimes there's jobs in my field, sometimes there's not.
Right.
And if you make the wrong move, you don't get a job.
What's your field?
Software.
Software.
Yeah.
So you have
I have
you have a degree. I mean, did you go to high school or college and learn this, or did you learn on your own, or what?
I have patents. I've worked for major corporations.
Wow.
Harvard, MathWorks. I've done major work.
Okay.
But
Well,
when there's no job, when no one's hiring, there's no job.
Right.
Michael, good luck. I hope things turn around for you, and I much appreciate your call and giving us your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the call, Michael, especially post-pandemic. I mean, it's just exploded with jobs not coming, certain types of jobs not coming back.
Well, one of the things I think is a big misconception is the cost of housing. I mean, people always say it's mental health and it's drug
Right.
addiction. Well, certainly there is some of that. But the places with the biggest problems with homelessness are places where the housing is the most expensive.
Right, that's absolutely right.
We used to be, back in '86 when we were so shocked about people being homeless, it's because we had rooming houses all over the Back Bay, and people could live, cheaply in these rooming houses. Needless to say, those rooming houses are all gone. AJ,
Well, there still are some there are a few like in places like JP. But
are
they're-
there?
But yeah, but they're fairly run down. I mean, it's not great.
AJ in Boston, thank you for calling.
Very good morning to you, and
Hi,
thank
AJ.
you for this programming.
Sure.
Hi. It just seems to me that there is capacity if there were a civic engagement, and I'm talking specifically about churches being emptied after hours. I mean, Catholic churches, black churches up and down Blue Hill Avenue in Roxbury. It would just seem to me that there is room if they wanted to have room made. You with me? And look,
Right.
I know it does require security. It does require food. It does require, cleanup. But people tithe. That's the use of the tithing. Maybe some of the state money can go to the cause, but I just drive by these buildings. They're all locked up, and I do not understand how these spaces are not leveraged. Places, not just for folks.
We're losing you, AJ. But I think we get your point
Right, right.
that there's a lot of empty buildings,
Well,
a lot of
there's-
empty churches. Thank you for the call.
His point is well taken, especially because that is the work that most churches seem to want to do, or at least preach that they want to do. But I think his larger point was about more of a public-private partnership. People
Yeah.
do see homelessness as a government issue, as opposed to the level of engagement and help beyond the nonprofit world that where people could really effectuate and do some good. Churches are just one of the kinds of buildings that are locked up at night. And I realize opening them up and having people live there, you have to make sure that they're outfitted, they have the proper plumbing, they have, that there are appropriate facilities and all of that, and there's a liability question. But it seems like almost nothing is being done, and we're not even exploring the use of some of these buildings, especially in the religious communities.
Here's Sheila in Attleboro. My friends, 2 adults and 4 children, are unhoused and can't find affordable apartments due to their credit issues, and no family is available. I mean, that's another thing. You can be working full-time at a job that's not paying you money, but not paying you enough money, and it's become so expensive to get an apartment here. They had a piece in the Globe today, I think 1 in 5 young people under the age of 30, I don't have it in front of me, so I forget exactly what it was, but the point was that young people are moving out of Massachusetts because it has become so expensive to live here. I mean, people are renting like 2 and 3 bedrooms in Somerville, which used to be so affordable, for like $3,500.
Right.
$3,500. It's insane. 877-301-8970 is our number. We're talking about homelessness in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The governor has decided to prioritize Massachusetts residents, families with veterans, over the people that are already prioritized. By the way, those are people who have medical needs, or they have newborn babies, or they're survivors of domestic violence. But it's the Massachusetts residents that are going to be prioritized. I think that's a good idea. What will that mean for the people that come here with young children who are migrants? We'll squeeze in one more call before the break. It's, I hope I pronounce it right, Satri from Cambridge.
Sherry, you mean?
Yes.
Sherry?
I'm sorry.
I don't know how we got Satri.
We were way off.
Right, way off. Sorry.
All right. Hi.
Hi.
I'm calling. I agree with the priorities the governor is setting because it's important. People in Massachusetts are important. I think the idea of using state buildings that are unused is very good idea, and I think that the governor should take away the tax breaks that she gave to rich people. That was for giving tax breaks.
Oh, yeah.
I'm all for taxing the rich.
Yeah, she did do that. She did do that at the beginning of her term.
Control or some kind of control on the rents would be very good, too. Because somehow you need to stop the rising price that these developers and real estate people are doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that call. One of the things that is so insane, Jim and I talk about this all the time, is that the people that wanted rent control, which were, when it was voted down by the state in 1994, I think it was, Cambridge, Boston, and Brookline, they wanted rent control, the people that had it. But people out in Sturbridge and Pittsfield and Worcester, there was a statewide ballot question that eliminated rent control. It was only in 3 places, and they eliminated it for the places that have it. And I've lived in Brookline forever. I mean, the change was almost immediate, and it was for the worse, if you ask me. So we can't get rent control. Mayor Wu has talked about rent stabilization. She calls it a little bit better, but she can't get it without permission, again, from this legislature, which is the least effective legislature in America, and does, I don't think, well by the citizenry. But anyway, we're going to take a break, I guess.
We do. We're going to be back in a moment. We're asking you what you make of the most recent changes to the Massachusetts shelter policy and how you think our state leaders, including Governor Healy, are handling it. More of your calls and texts after the break. Stick around. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
In Japan, Nanmoku is known as the country's oldest village. More than 2/3 of its residents are seniors, and local leaders are trying to attract new residents.
First sign is here is the nice mountain village life.
Enticing young people with the good life. That story and more next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Commonwealth Shakespeare Company, presenting The Winter's Tale, Shakespeare's captivating parable of betrayals and renewed hope, is this summer's free Shakespeare on the Boston Common, July 16th through August 4th. comshakes.org. And the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you very much. It makes me very happy to get those applause here. Anyway, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about Governor Healey's new plan for emergency housing in Massachusetts, which would prioritize Massachusetts residents over migrants who come here from other countries. Overflow shelters will be limited to 5 days stays starting in August, and some say the changes risk putting the state's most vulnerable populations, families with young kids, out on the streets. What do you think? 877-301-8970, 877-301-8970. Here is Art from West Bridgewater. Solution: amend the right to shelter law to only Mass residents who lose their housing. It's not our Massachusetts taxpayers' responsibility to pay for everyone who just comes here from wherever. Other people are pointing out, what you were talking about, the state buildings that are empty, university dorms are empty all summer. But again, putting the people in state buildings or dorms or churches, wherever it is, costs a lot of money, right? You're going to have food, you're going to have security, you're going to have lights on, you're going to have heat in the wintertime. So who's going to pay for that?
But you weigh that against the hotel rooms, to Michael, our first caller's point. What we're paying for hotel rooms. Now, the reason that hotel rooms and motel rooms get chosen is because they have infrastructure within the room. They have plumbing within the room, a bathroom,
shower,
that kind of thing, and usually at least places nearby to eat, vending machines on site, and so on and so forth. And they usually easily, public transportation there's easy access to it. But I mean, the bottom line for this is that thinking has to change around this, and a real root cause analysis type. Where are all of our resources? And that includes increasing taxes on very wealthy people. Because the more we use regular taxpayers' money or all taxpayers' money for stuff like this, and don't address that if the wealthiest in this country paid a fraction of the taxes that they should be paying and that they owe, we wouldn't even be having this conversation about, do we give it to hotel owners or do we use it for dorms or state buildings?
One of the achievements, if you are like this tax breaks for the wealthy thing, that was the major achievement of Donald Trump's presidency, was to give tax cuts to the wealthy and corporations and billionaires. And he said he's going to keep them. He wants to keep them when if he becomes the president again. Whereas Joe Biden wanted to raise taxes on people making over $400,000, not on people making under $400,000. And I would argue if you're making over $400,000, you're probably in a pretty good position there to pay a little bit more taxes. But I'm a income inequality. I think you are too. It's gotten out of control, and that's part of the reason we have such terrible rental and housing prices here in the Commonwealth. Ted Lewis in Quincy.
Hi, Ted.
Hi. First, I want to echo the comment of a prior caller who said that, why are we giving tax rebates at a time when we need the resources to address this issue as well as other issues? And
tax rebates? What do you mean?
But more importantly,
what do you mean tax rebates, Ted?
Just last year, the governor decided, rather than making use of our available resources, to give a tax rebate. Which I don't remember if you noticed it. Maybe we got like $50 each, but that was a lot of resources that could have been used to address this.
Oh, he's talking about when money was returned because we went over the percentage, and so then you got
yeah, and so, but more importantly, the rhetoric around immigration, as if immigrants were exclusively a pest, I think belies the history and the spirit of this country. As you know, we're a nation of immigrants, whether it was the Irish, the Jews from Eastern Europe. Immigrants are the lifeblood of this country. And the idea that people are coming to this country willy-nilly, just the persecution, the economic privations, and
we get all that,
the physical
Ted.
hazard that people have.
But what do we do about it?
What
do we do about it?
Well, what we do is we welcome them. We don't just characterize them as pests. We welcome them. We evaluate how we can generate the resources necessary. And part of that is going to be not giving tax rebates. Part of it is going to be taxing the wealthier. But we should be putting ourselves in the endeavor of how are we going to take care of people who have faced incredible danger and peril to to improve their circumstances and escape danger. That's what we should be doing instead of just characterizing them as pests.
Ted, I appreciate the call, but on the other hand, we read constantly about people in years-long waits for affordable housing here in Massachusetts that have lived here all their lives, and they've worked full-time jobs, and they can't afford their rents. We have these horrible stories about the schools in Boston with the sinks aren't working, the toilets aren't working. I mean, it's like, it's a tough one because I can see why people's feeling that if they are struggling and they've lived here all their lives, they would like more help than someone who just showed up here, no matter the hardship they endured. And you do read these terrible stories about people coming across the desert and dying, and children carrying children up hills and down. I mean,
Didn't the IRS collect, I think it was, I think the number 9 is popping into my head. It might be more than that. $9 billion in taxes, uncollected taxes from among the wealthiest in this country just in the last year, based on some changes in rules and laws. And that's a fraction of what they would be able to recover if we rescinded some of these tax cuts and went, especially for corporations, and went full bore.
It's not just that. To all these people that say, why aren't you more bipartisan? It's because, I think it's fair to say that the Republican Party now is all for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is all for helping out people like himself. If the GOP did not veto more money for the IRS, it's easy to go after Joe and Jane taxpayer because they don't have a lot of resources.
That's why they want to cripple the IRS.
But it's different to go after somebody like Elon Musk because he's got enough lawyers, or like Donald Trump did, to keep you in court forever, right? So if you like that idea that we can't hire enough IRS agents to go after the people that are the real millionaire and billionaire scufflaws, vote for Donald Trump, because more of that is going to continue if he wins.
Well, along with the dismantling of the DOJ and the FBI and everything else. So let's talk to Barbara in Cape Cod. Hi, Barbara.
Hi. Thank you. I'm thinking that greed should be a public health crisis. And I just wanted to mention one thing two things that have happened recently. I won't mention denomination, but my friend died in December and donated $25,000 to his church. And then when I asked if someone could speak at his funeral Wednesday morning, they weren't available. They were in a meeting. And then another person asked to have last rites, and I was told we don't do that anymore. So I decided to go online.
Well, that would be the Catholic Church, Barbara. I think we figured it out.
Yes, that's right. That's right. The other was not. But I went online to look at their donation responsible investing site. They have billions with an S. If they have that much money, they need to be taxed, because what are they doing with that money?
Well, Barbara, in fairness, Catholic Charities is the biggest charity besides the government in the United States. Catholic Charities does do a lot of really good work, social services and stuff. I'm not going to defend an individual parish. I don't know what goes on there. But they do, they have done a lot for migrants, actually, right here in Boston. So I don't know about that parish of yours down the Cape, Barbara. Maybe give it a second look. I don't know.
Well, I understand Barbara's point and why she's making it. I generally believe that the original purpose of not taxing churches was because it was religious speech, and you just didn't do that. I do think that the line has become blurred to the point of indistinguishability between political speech by churches and, religious speech. Churches that are encouraging, a certain sort of political belief, regardless of what it is, that shouldn't be happening.
No.
And if you use the power and influence of a particular church with its money or something else to influence a political situation, that you should be taxed for something like that. And believe me, with the mega churches, there's billions and billions of dollars out there that are going to support these gigantic buildings, these mega churches, and these preachers that are billionaires.
That's right. Well, Jesus wants a little bit more cash to operate, so you have to keep sending him money to make sure that he can.
Yeah, the need for money has always been a thing with Jesus.
We are out of time, but thank you for all the calls, and thank you for all the texts, and sorry for the ones we didn't get to.
We do appreciate it. GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen is up next. He's going to fulfill all of your summer art exhibit needs, and he's going to explain how Kamala Harris's campaign got a big boost online from pop star Charlie XCX. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
The news moves fast. We're bringing you continuing coverage of President Joe Biden's decision to end his bid for re-election. GBH News is here with local reporters on the ground.
Markey told GBH News that Biden's decision will now make it possible for Harris to take up the Democrats' torch.
In a statement, Healy called Harris a proven leader and the best person to make the case against Donald Trump. She also said Harris would support growth, innovation, and investment in Massachusetts.
Stay here for continued coverage on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And ISS National. Researchers and developers can learn how to take their research to space at the International Space Station Research and Development Conference in Boston, July 29th to August 1st. Registration at issconference.org. And the Peabody Essex Museum, where visitors can experience art and culture in real life. Escape the algorithm. You can see what's happening this week at pem.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Andrew Cabral is in for Jim Browdy, and we are broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at YouTube. Boy, I tell you, I love this audience today. We almost never get anybody clapping. I think you people should come back every single day. And thank you very much. Anyway, we are joined now. Did I say we're on youtube.com/GBH News? Yes, I did.
Think so.
And Andrew Cabral is here for Jim. Okay, we are joined now by GBH Executive Arts Editor and host of The Culture Show, which airs every day at 2 and is here right after us every Friday at the Boston Public Library. That would be, of course, Jared Bowen. Hi, Jared.
Hello,
Great to see you
Jared.
both.
Hello, Jared.
I have lots of FOMO because I'm not filling in with you as much anymore because of the culture show.
I know. Andrew's moved right in.
Well, we're up. I think we're up in August.
We are.
That's right. You're up in August.
You get a well-deserved break, Margie.
That's right.
So Jared and I will be here. Jared, we talked about this yesterday, just for a bit, with our beloved local woman and media maven Sue O'Connell. But this pop music Kamala Harris campaign marriage or union is an actual thing. This thing between integrating her and support for her into pop music with some really well-known folks. This does not seem to be a passing fancy. This seems to be a real thing.
Well, it also doesn't seem to be that contrived, that it happened rather organically with the announcement that she will likely be the nominee. You had just a whole number of pop singers rush forward. Kesha, Katy Perry, Charlie XCX.
Oh, we got the song. We got her song.
Cardi B.
Should we play a clip?
Yeah.
Yeah, here's a clip of the song of the summer, making Kamala Harris go viral. This is Apple by Charlie XCX. I need to hear the lyrics a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, and the integration. But she's British, and she's integrated Kamala Harris as the coconut tree, falling out of the coconut tree thing.
Yeah, there are all these ways that they're coalescing around Kamala Harris right now, and I think what is significant here is that we talk so much about the youth vote and disenchanted youth voters, and here, if you're to believe that pop stars can drive politics in this country and can have some measure of influence, and they are doing a lot of work for Kamala Harris at this moment, because this just seems to be growing and growing and growing. You talk about the older celebrity contingent that's on board, Barbara Streisand, George Clooney, a host of people, Jamie Lee Curtis, they're all doing what they can do on their level. But yeah, you have these young people who I think are looking at an individual that they've never seen in this position before and are really galvanized around it. And I think what's hilarious is they're calling Kamala is brat, which means just embrace your individual self. I'll translate for Gen Z. I think I have that right. I'm a little far removed from them at this point. But this is something that could be a pivotal change and something that certainly Donald Trump doesn't have, because he's fighting all of the pop stars who don't want him to use their music.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right.
23 of them.
It's enormous. That list is...
Elton John, Adele, R.E.M., the Rolling Stones, Axl Rose, John Fogerty from Creedence Clearwater, Rihanna, even Luciano Pavarotti's Survivors. He's no longer with us,
Queen,
but I guess
Brian May.
Yeah, they're all.
Yeah. Prince's brother. From the Prince estate, because he was using Purple Rain.
They don't want him to sing these songs. We have a clip, actually, of Rockin' in the Free World by Neil Young. He's one of the first artists to tell Trump he can't play his songs because Trump was using, as his official campaign announcement back in 2015, one of Young's songs, and he sued. Here it is. But they're playing them anyway, aren't they?
This is really interesting. I read a piece not too long ago. There was a Northeastern law professor who was weighing in, and this gets very, very complicated because as a candidate in the political realm, you actually do need to get permission to play the music.
Right.
You need to license it, and you need to pay in order to play it. It gets a little bit more complicated when you're in a stadium or an arena or something of that nature because often the venue itself will have a relationship with ASCAP, the music industry, so that they have the rights. However, there's an exclusion if you're a political figure. You can't use that to play the music. The other element that makes this kind of convoluted is that it isn't necessarily always the artist. Say Madonna steps forward and says, you can't use my song. She doesn't necessarily have that right if she doesn't own the copyright to her music, if she hasn't written the song, but it's just something that she's recorded, because in that instance, it's the label or somebody in the record industry who has that, so they could ultimately grant permission. But this is...
Or if the catalog's been sold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it isn't always the artist who has that, although I think if you're Donald Trump, you're not going to start playing music by Bruce Springsteen because it's getting booed and people don't want to hear it. You're detracting attention away from yourself rather than trying to throw your hate toward Bruce Springsteen. That, by the way, really happened when he was using, I think it was Born in the USA, for his campaign rallies. So it gets very convoluted, but there isn't a huge list of people who are okay, other than Kid Rock, with Donald Trump using their music.
Well, what I thought was interesting was, in this particular piece, and this was in Business Insider, Jennifer Hussein is the person who wrote the piece on the number of artists. There was only one instance where the Trump campaign responded that they had somehow paid for the right to the music. The absence of saying that for any of these others, because they clearly contacted them, indicates that you're either talking about the songwriter that doesn't want you to use the song regardless of who recorded it, or the artist who recorded it. And just like he doesn't, I think there's a lack of respect for the artist and the songwriter, but it comes down to him not paying. He hasn't paid for the venues that he has had his rallies at for years now. He was known for not paying contractors when he was building. Yep. So he simply wants to use it and not pay for it. And that's really what it comes down to. But the majority of people in this article have sent legal cease and desist letters, which indicates to me that they have the legal right to stop him.
And he's also giving oxygen and headlines to these artists. Every time he plays them, it's more opportunity for them to rear up, and maybe they think that's welcome because he can paint this picture of the liberal elite, quote unquote, who's against him. But you do see the headlines every time people step forward, and of course they come with a very sizable audience. And again, if we go back to pop culture driving politics, which I think you can argue to some degree it does, not totally, but people can be influenced by media figures, entertainers, singers, actors they
Taylor
really
Swift
like.
could, in a word, get a lot of people.
Exactly.
She got over 30,000 to register to vote.
I wish she would.
She has, yeah. Well, she hasn't stepped up, I think, what you're saying officially.
Yeah, officially.
And for the record, I think it's this campaign that's doing this. Now, I don't think Trump is picking the songs and, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he would pick Pavarotti. Do we think?
I don't know. I was surprised to see Pavarotti on there.
He referred to him as a great friend.
That's
and that was in 2017, and he appeared not to know that Pavarotti had died in 2007.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know that he picked the song.
That was he's used Tom Petty's "I Won't Back Down" a lot and Tom Petty's family is upset about that
The
too.
estate.
But anyway, tell us about this giant rooster in New Bedford.
This is great.
This is great. This is really, really fun. So I was down on the South Coast recently, and I saw the giant rooster. This is part of DATMA, which we've talked about before, which is an arts organization that has really focused on elevating the arts in the South Coast region, alongside the Art Museum, alongside the Whaling Museum, the ballet company there. It's an arts-rich region because they also have a poet laureate, and they have all collaborated. Well, this year, the theme is transform, reduce, revive, reimagine. And even though it's only this year's theme, this rooster is up for a long time to come. So it is 12 feet long, 25 feet tall, and it's by the Portuguese artist Bordalo II. This is significant because there's a large Portuguese community around New Bedford, Fall River, Marguerite, as you know well, having grown up there.
We were, with our buddy from across the street.
So they went to Portugal to find this great artist who has worked his way up from being a street artist and known for causing havoc and trouble as a graffiti artist on the streets to being in mainstream art world. And what he does is he creates these animal sculptures out of plastics. And what we would call trash, he calls unused materials. So you'll find barrels and road signs, and I noticed a plastic rocking horse, that you would have when you're a child, you're just in the nursery or bedroom or something, cones and all manner of things that the community actually came together to donate. Lindsay Misch, who's the executive director at DATMA, she told me how she filled the back of her car with a lot of these materials. They brought them, and they also had kids from the Greater New Bedford Vocational Technical High School work with them to construct the architecture of this rooster, and it actually became bigger as they were creating it. But this is all a look at our consumption and consumerism and what we're doing with all of our waste, how much waste we have, and the way that it's affecting the environment and the way it's affecting animals, especially if you're talking about New Bedford, which is right there on the coast. Obviously, we know what plastics are doing in the ocean. We know about the great garbage patch that swirls around. So I think, in addition to all of the sort of social commentary and environmental commentary it brings, it's just really fun and really cool because it's very colorful. If people want to look at it, I posted it on my Instagram yesterday. It's at the Jared Bowen. It's super fun and very colorful, and it stands sentry as you're driving up the hill into New Bedford. And this is also by design because this is still a community that has vacant spaces downtown. We saw UMass Dartmouth pull out of.
That was terrible.
Awful.
That they got away with that. They left all those kids in the lurch. That was awful.
Yeah, they pulled out of a building that was a major building right on a corner in downtown. The DATMA had actually used for gallery space as well, so that sits vacant. So this is a way to lure tourists up from the waterfront and see more of downtown, which has the museums, it has great restaurants, great bakeries. I love to go there. I love to eat there every time I go. So it's just a really fun moment for them.
Well, they've done a beautiful job with the Whaling Museum and the houses next to it that are just so, they're hundreds of years old, right? And if you like the whales, we had the great story today about the breaching whale that tipped over the boat in New Hampshire. Everybody was okay, but that was wild.
That is totally wild.
Yeah.
And totally by accident.
Totally by accident, yeah.
No, I was just going to say that New Bedford has been very intentional for the last many, many years about bringing that city back.
Yeah.
And so they changed the downtown, their cobblestone streets. It's lovely down there. And the only reason I know it is because we ended up opening up a dispensary there, and they were very welcoming for the dispensary. It was in a historical building, but they made up their minds a while ago, and their local government is all on board. The citizenry seems to be on board. They intend to be a destination for people in ways that they haven't been historically. I think they didn't like how people felt about New Bedford. Like the only time you ever heard about it was they talk about murders in New Bedford or something like that. But this is a really big deal for them.
And I think that DATMA is a perfect example of everything you're just talking about, Andrew, because DATMA showed up. They said, we want to do this. We want to make public art. In a city like Boston, it can be very, very complicated with permitting and permissions and all that you have to negotiate to do that. But New Bedford basically said, come on in, you're welcome. And it brings tourism, it brings energy, it brings vitality, it gets people really excited. And yeah, it's a beautiful. If people haven't been, especially
It's
if
very
you're in Massachusetts,
pretty.
I think we're very good in Massachusetts about not going to our own places.
Right. Yeah, it's very pretty. And
yeah.
the Seaman's Bethel that lists the people that died in the fishing boats and the whaling ships.
Right.
And all that. That's pretty cool too. Anyway, let's move on to. You just came back from a trip to Japan, and we're talking about these wonderful.
I didn't know you went
islands
to
full
Japan.
of art. Yes, you did. It was a great trip. But tell us what's happening at the Museum of Fine Arts regarding Japanese art.
So they have just reopened their Japanese art galleries. They have been closed for several years for major renovations. And actually, I saw the galleries reopened right before I went, and now I understand how much this is completely tied into the culture and aesthetics of Japan. So Anne Nishimura Morse, who is a longtime curator there of the Japanese art, has reimagined these galleries in a really impactful way, I think. But first of all, the backstory that we should know is that the MFA has basically had this collection in its holdings since 1876. That's when major collecting really began, which makes the MFA holdings maybe the largest outside of Japan in terms of everything they have. And we're talking masks and robes and swords, everything tea-related, prints, etc. And so what she's done is really kind of brought the temperature down in the galleries, I think, in terms of you don't walk in and even though they have hundreds of thousands of artifacts, actually I think it's about 100,000 objects in its collection, she's just showing a few at a time so that you have time to just stop and look and appreciate. And as I was working my way through Japan and going to museums and going through galleries, I realized it's all curated in the same manner, which is, it's not unlike Marie Kondo. Let's reduce the clutter. Let's just appreciate what we have and appreciate beauty one at a time. So she's done that. You'll see 3 robes, for example, 1 mask, 3 swords. By the way, the swords are phenomenal, and they date back hundreds and hundreds of years. The sword guards there are beautiful too. But it also allows you to have still moments with scrolls and paintings. You'll see a painting by Hokusai, who we know from doing The Great Wave. It's not a landscape at all. It's a woman facing a mirror. So you just get to stop and consider other elements of Japanese art in a very different way. A couple of other great things they have done is they've created a Japanese tea room, mixing older pieces with contemporary pieces. And then a lot of people, their first destination at the MFA is to go to the Japanese Buddhist temple room. And that has been fully restored, new lighting, somewhat new configuration, and they have removed all wall text. So you can experience all of that, read everything you want outside of it, but you go in there and it's just a very quiet, contemplative space.
Can I just ask you to talk a little bit about the use of screens in Japanese art to tell a bigger story than a single, painting or drawing would? It's unique to Japanese art, isn't it?
Or
maybe unique to Asian art.
You see Chinese scrolls too. In fact, I saw some great examples of very contemporary versions of this when I was in Japan too. So the tradition continues. But yes, it's really telling the story of. It's telling allegory. It's showing the beauty of landscapes. It's showing history in cases. But in all manner of it, as you move from right to left, following the narrative of these screens, you are ingesting so many deep layers of Japanese culture in the screens, and
can you go
so
back
gorgeous.
and see things you've missed? Like, do you go back?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I found myself often doing that, going back and forth, because one day, if you've just come from a Zen garden or something, you might be more particularly attuned to the landscapes because you see how finely rendered the trees are, but then you start looking at the costuming and the gorgeous, sumptuous robes. So beautiful. The other thing she pointed out to me is that what she's tried to do is place the understated next to opulence, so you get the full range.
Okay, so
nice.
Mass Art, right up the street on Huntington Avenue, which does such great stuff there now. Tell us about this displacement thing.
Yeah, I think this is a show that I have thought a lot about since, because I think it's so frightening in some regard. And this is something that the arts do so well, is to look at our times and our travails and tell different stories about them. So Displacement on view at Mass Art through December 8th. By the way, the Mass Art Museum is always free. But this is looking at how artists are looking at climate change. So we have a video of a wolf puppy who was frozen for 57,000 years in the permafrost, which is not permanent anymore. Obviously, it's melting, and things like wolf carcasses, people are being revealed. So it's this video that takes us up close into something that we never should actually be seeing, but here it's revealed to us because
you read about the
temperatures
on Mount Everest?
Yes, yeah.
This is happening on Mount
bodies
Everest.
are turning
people
up.
that have been there for decades and decades.
Not to mention all the trash. Did you see that recent story about all the trash they're hauling out of there? It's tons of trash. How is that possible?
Yeah, people that were killed in avalanches or killed in the ice or whatever. Yeah, they were in ice and snow, and they're no longer in ice and snow. Oh, my God.
We see a video of Nantucket and what's happening there. And I think that just literally brings it home when you see what's happening on the coast. These are things that we read about. We see the studies. We see the reports. We hear people talking about it. But when you see an artist rendering it or capturing the truth, as the two examples I've talked about, it changes. I think the all-star piece in this, though, is something called the Black Gold Tapestry, which the artist Sandra Sawatsky has been working on for 9 years. And she has literally embroidered 5,000 years of history in 200 feet long. So it just winds and winds and winds.
I can see why it takes 10 years to do that.
So talk about your slow walking in scrolls. This is what you're doing, and you're looking at the time of the dinosaurs all the way up to wars, because it's basically charting how we have taken coal and oil and what we've done to the earth and what we've done to the climate to basically, since the Industrial Revolution, how that all changed. That we kind of had peace on the planet in terms of climate through the Egyptians and through the Greeks, and then all the way up until about 200 years ago when it all began to change.
That is an absolutely astounding achievement. And the dedication that it takes to stay at it for 10 years. And she's doing it, it says it's done in silk and wool threads on flax linen cloth. That's a very particular, medium to use. She's got to be one of the most dedicated artists ever.
That's a lot of patience that I don't have, and Andrea, I'm thinking the way you're talking, you don't have that kind of patience either.
No,
but it must be stunning.
I do love linen, though.
It's really stunning.
Linen makes me very happy. I love linen.
Because it's so flowy
fabric.
and breathable.
It's just cool.
She just likes linen generally.
I do like linen. It's a wonderful thing. So what's going on in the culture show?
Well, I heard you tease the scent too.
Yes.
So here's one other thing. Every other Thursday in August, every Thursday in September, they'll also be burning incense from another artist who has created basically a scent of what she believes the first forest smelled like, and then another scent for what the final forest might smell like.
What is that?
And again,
burning?
Because I was not there on a Thursday, I didn't. Even for me, they wouldn't light up the incense, but I didn't have a sense of it. But I think again, this is why it's so important that artists are working into this realm, because it's different when you suddenly smell something that is related to climate change rather than reading about it. It sticks with you. As I say, I have not stopped thinking about this show.
Okay, we only have a minute left here. You got to make it snappy.
I'll make it snappy. We have Mass Art President, speaking of Mass Art.
Oh, she's great.
Mary Grant. She's our recurring regular on the Culture Show. She'll be on. We have Michael C. Thorpe, who is an Emerson College basketball star turned photographer turned quilter, who has a new exhibition at the Fuller Craft Museum. And then Edgar B. Herwick III has been diving into the Charles, so he'll talk about that.
Why would you want to dive into the Charles?
Just to see if it's safe or not.
Oh, yeah?
As all the swimmers in Paris are about to do it.
Bill Weld did it after having a glass of amber liquid.
Yeah.
He survived.
And none of his parts fell off.
Right. Yeah, I think the crucial thing is to dive in and get out. Don't drink any water or anything while you're down there. Make it snappy, as I just said, Jared. That's the way to do it. Thank you very much, Jared.
Thanks, Jared. I'll see you next month.
Yes.
We've been speaking with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen, host of The Culture Show, weekdays right after BPR at 2 p.m. Up next, the head of the Secret Service has resigned after Trump's assassination attempt, and now the organization is urging Trump to stop holding outdoor rallies altogether. We're set to speak with national security expert Juliette Kayyem. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
The world's oceans, and witness how wildlife and people are adapting. Watch Sea Change, Bounty of Maine, tonight at 10 on GBH2.
I'm Ellen London, Managing Editor for GBH News, and you're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Marjorie Egan, ahead on Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. First up at noon, it's national security expert Harvard's Juliet.
And what happens when heavy rains cause overflow and water quality issues. We'll also talk with medical ethicist Art Kaplan about the ethics of allowing intimate relationships in nursing homes before we close out with you asking, if a friend does you dirty in your dream, are you entitled to hold a grudge? All next, Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Prime Minister of the nation's capital. Netanyahu's government is navigating alliances between U.S. political rivals this election year. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister meets separately with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, a likely Democratic Party presidential nominee. He's also scheduled to meet with the GOP nominee, former President Donald Trump. Vice President Harris won't be presiding over Netanyahu's speech to Congress this afternoon. Instead, as NPR's Asma Khalid reports, she's in Indianapolis for a previously scheduled campaign stop.
At that stop, Harris is delivering remarks to members of a historically black sorority. An aide to Harris said the vice president's travel to Indianapolis should not be interpreted as a change in her position on Israel. The aide said that Harris has held an unwavering commitment to the security of Israel, and the vice president still plans to meet with the Israeli prime minister in Washington this week, a meeting in which her team says she intends to discuss efforts to reach a ceasefire deal. This all comes at a critical moment for Harris. She's now the likely Democratic presidential nominee, and the war in Gaza has remained a tricky issue for this administration to navigate. Asma Khalid, NPR News.
President Biden is due to deliver an Oval Office address tonight at 8 Eastern about his plans for the remainder of his term. The head of the International Olympic Committee says France is ready for the competition to get underway at the Summer Games in Paris. And the IOC's president is warning shifts in global diplomacy threaten the future of the Games. Here's NPR's Brian Mann.
Thomas Bach typically describes the Olympic movement in glowing terms as a beacon of hope and unity. But in a series of speeches this week, the IOC president painted a darker picture, saying wars and growing diplomatic tensions threaten the Olympic movement.
The trends are unfortunately clear. Decoupling of economies, narrow self-interests trumping the rule of law.
As global tensions rise with wars in Ukraine and Gaza, Bach has struggled to maintain the IOC's political neutrality with mixed success. Russia, once one of the biggest Olympic supporters, sent only 15 athletes to Paris and is now seen as a possible threat to these games, with officials here wary of disinformation and cyber attacks by Moscow.
It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell has the wheels in motion to have another company take over long-term care facilities here in Massachusetts. WBZ-TV reports that some nursing homes haven't paid their workers for weeks, and nurses at the facilities run by Blue Point Healthcare said staffing levels and medical supplies have been dangerously low. Campbell is now involved, and the search is underway to find a more suitable company to take over. National Park Service has announced plans for an $81 million investment in Boston National Historical Park sites, saying that the money will help modernize and upgrade some facilities at the Boston National Historic Park property in Charlestown. Of course, that's home of the USS Constitution, the world's oldest commissioned warship. According to an announcement released by the Federal Department of the Interior last week, plan includes a new visitor center where the Constitution is docked. That work is funded by the Great American Outdoors Act of 2020, a bipartisan law that provided nearly $3 billion for conservation projects and outdoor recreation and maintenance of public lands. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey may not have hit the most popular governor mark that her predecessor, Charlie Baker, did, but she's still among the top state executives in the country. According to a new Morning Consult poll, Healey ranked 14th on the list of the 59% approval and 30% disapproval, just below Delaware Governor John Carney and right above Tennessee Governor Bill Lee. It is 74 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from Angie, dedicated to helping homeowners find skilled pros to get their home projects done well, from everyday repairs to major remodels. Reviews, pricing, and booking are at Angie.com or on the Angie app. This is NPR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Andrea Cabral is in for Jim today. I'm Marjorie Egan. Hello again, Andrea.
Hello again, Marjorie.
Thank you for coming.
You're very welcome.
We are here at the Boston Public Library today. We'll be here on Friday with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner talking about the latest. Well, the Supreme Court's not really doing anything because they're out of session now, but we'll find some law.
They're just waiting.
They're just waiting. They're gearing up for more assaults next term. But anyway, we're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. And we are joined now at the library by Juliette Kayyem, former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Barack Obama and the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Her latest book, with the best title ever, is The Devil Never Sleeps: Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters. Hi, Juliette.
Hello.
Hello, Juliette. Long time no see.
I know.
Glad
nice
to see
you.
I've already expressed my envy about the fact that you'll be going to the Olympics,
Yes.
which we'll be talking to you about in just a few minutes. I thought of you when the head of the Secret Service, Cheadle, resigned yesterday.
Yeah.
For 2 reasons. One, because of what the Secret Service does, and it is about executive protection at the highest level. And 2, I wanted to know what you thought about, her sort of taking the bullet, because I don't think anybody believes that she's the one that created the security plan.
Right.
And the second part is, it's characterized as sort of a bipartisan reaction to her in Congress, and I didn't know whether or not you thought that was true or you parsed it a little.
No, I think, let me answer the second one first, which is after she testified, Jamie Raskin, the Democratic committee minority chair of the Homeland Security Committee, said she had to resign. So they lost Jamie Raskin. When that happens, just if you're thinking politically and you're the White House, it's going to be very hard to create a narrative that other Democrats will abide by. So in some ways, I think her leaving just tried to head off some of the impact that Raskin would have had within the party. She did herself no favors. It was a hard hearing in terms of what she disclose, what she was able to disclose, and what she probably should have disclosed. She's clearly walking a fine line between these outside investigations and what we know happened. But she had to go. I mean, the fact that she didn't recognize she had to go is... I think shows her either naivete or is proof why she had to go. The Secret Service is in the middle of sort of 2 time frames I keep describing. One is the past and the assassination attempt and what happened, and explaining that and explaining all the errors. And then the other is we're entering a threat environment that is like no other, which changed significantly when Biden said he wasn't going to run again, because now you have a mixed race or African American woman who's going to be running. And so there's no way that the director could have straddled both, and therefore I think had to walk away. They'll get new leadership. These it seems like a big deal. I don't mean to sound, not serious about it, but there's next in lines. There's people who are prepared to take the lead. They can take the heat off the Secret Service so it can focus on what on the move forward. FBI Director Wray is testifying right now, so I just got off air on that, and he's saying basically, we don't know much, and any serious questions you have, please ask the Secret Service.
Yeah, she also did not acquit herself very well in those meetings. She was so evasive about what went on and why that building wasn't more secure.
I don't know why the White House didn't tell her to quit on Sunday.
Yeah.
I really don't. I mean, everyone knew she was going to leave that, having to quit the moment she was called. And everyone makes a comparison to the Reagan assassination. And 8 months, it took 8 months for that Secret Service director to resign. I think this is a very different scenario from one you do have the politics of the time, but the other is the time frame of so many local, state, and federal failures in terms of safety and security, which started weeks before when the site was protected, when the security area was designed.
Right.
That long period is just too many errors. It wasn't just like you were moving the president from a room to the car. It was something else. We still don't know his motive, by the way.
So Trump, well, he was a loner. We know that much,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that was what they say about all of them.
Yeah.
I just wish they'd stop running his junior high school picture.
Yeah.
When they talk about him on CNN, they've got his picture from junior high. He was an adult.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there are pictures of him as an adult, and putting that up makes it seem like some kid grabbed an AR-15, a real kid.
I think the irony, though, I will say this on the kid front, the irony or the contradiction that we're never going to be able to explain is, by all accounts so far, he's not influenced by a foreign entity.
Right.
He doesn't have a significant military training. He's a novice. He's immature. He's not sophisticated, and even he could overcome all of these barriers with the drones and the whatever. And you're like, okay, if someone was trying really hard, and had a foreign entity behind them, anything could happen.
Well, exactly true. Apparently, he was just going. He was not a very good shot, and he went to the rifle range, I guess, the day before.
Got the bullets then too.
Yes, to improve his aim, which turned out, thank God, not to be very good, but obviously hit the fire chief that was killed and the two other people. But the foreign president, is not going to hold any more outdoor rallies, apparently, after this assassination attempt. Is that a wise thing to do?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, and I'm surprised. I don't think I've seen that stated for Kamala, but I don't know if it's because she's the vice president, so they probably have much more control over her. But for Vice President Harris, I would say that's absolutely right, at least given the threat environment that we're in. They're more expensive. I mean, this is, part of the, why was it there?
Right.
What was going on? Part of it is it's more expensive. It's your failure to fill a room is more obvious, and that's
a big thing for him. But it is more expensive, and your site in an indoor location, you've got a discrete number of doors, exits and entrances that you're responsible for, and surrounding buildings. Outdoors,
anything.
It's wide open. And I will say this before we leave this topic. The one point that Cheadle did make was about resources for the Secret Service. And they've been protecting Trump at these outdoor. He's been doing these rallies since before he was elected, way back when. Yeah. That's a lot of resources. That's a lot of money.
There's another story that an enterprising reporter is going to figure out, which is to what extent was the movement of funds and resources from the Secret Service, from FEMA, from other agencies at DHS to satisfy the insatiable appetite for border enforcement. To what extent did that impact Secret Service? We know it impacted FEMA. There's just documentation to it. That is a story that needs to be told, which is, were the resources moved over to the border issue because of all the fighting?
That's a really good point.
We're talking to our national security expert, Juliette Kayyem. People may recall Robert Card. He was the man who killed 18 people and wounded 13 more in Lewiston, Maine, a while back. This is an incredible story in the Globe that says that the Robert Card was in a mental hospital in New York, that he had a hit list apparently, and the medical people there at that medical facility found he had symptoms of psychosis and homicidal ideations, and they said he should be involuntarily committed by a judge. But then they canceled that date with the judge, and he walked out of the facility, and days later went on a shooting rampage. According to this story, the staff at this hospital won't talk to the Army about what happened.
Yeah. Why they made that assessment.
Why they first said he was homicidal psychosis, homicidal ideations, involuntarily commitment, which seemed to be the right thing to do. Then they changed their mind. They walked out a day later. How can they not talk to the Army doing an investigation?
Because they're going to be sued, so their lawyers are probably telling them don't be. Of course, they're going to be sued. I mean, look,
by
these
who?
cases.
The Card's family?
No, by the victims' families.
Oh, the victim's family.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be lawsuits. There always are. This is
Card's
just like the
family
parents.
could sue them too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But these are the parent. This is the equivalent of the cases. I don't know if they win, but these are the equivalent of the school cases where people are now going after the parents. This is a situation in which so we need to know what happened. Why did a professional say this is a person who is going to literally kill lots of people, flashing red lights? Then says no, fine or whatever, and then he goes and does it. Look, I don't know if they should win a case. I don't know the details of it, but it is a reminder that in almost all of these cases, these active shooter mass killings, there are flashing red lights, signage. Lots of things telling us that this is about to happen, and that the community, if they have it around these people, the parents, a hospital, whatever else, are essentially duty bound at this stage to imagine the worst rather than think that he got over it. He got over it. Obviously he didn't. And his psychosis sounds pretty deep. Just when I read that story,
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound like he had like a bad day. Like it sounds like it was deep.
His own family was telling authorities that he was gone off the deep end.
Yeah.
And not a danger to himself or others is actually in almost, for some psychiatrists, an in the moment assessment, and then they move on to the next assessment. Psychosis is a long-term
exactly.
problem.
Right, exactly. And you also, what they have to piece together is that psychosis related to access to guns. If you're in Maine, you know his history, then your alarm bell should be going off even more.
Yeah, the military people's alarm bells went off.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm wondering, and you were talking about this before because you're both lawyers, at some point they're going to have to explain at this hospital what happened.
Yeah.
And we presume that's going to be in the court of law when they are
there's
sued.
investigations going on. There's going to be administrative penalty. There's going to be people who lose their jobs and all sorts of things. Yes.
They're going to wait for a subpoena.
Yeah, they're not going to.
They're going to try to wait for a subpoena.
They're exposed.
And hide behind
they were the
HIPAA.
last entity that had possession of him before he goes on a huge spree. And the same way the school districts are starting to get exposed.
And they reversed a decision that they had already made that he was committable.
And you wonder if it's a resource issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Could be.
Okay. Well,
so now I get to express more envy about you going to the Olympics. Okay, first of all, tell us, why you're going to the Olympics.
So, and then are we going to talk? Well,
and then we're going to talk about Boston.
Oh my God! So this is, I remind people. So the Olympics start Friday night, opening ceremony, daytime here in Paris. Most people know I have a consulting wing to my various efforts, and a lot of what I do is mega event planning. So I get to, as I say, I get to go to fun events and not have fun. And so they stick me in a bunker. In this case, there were a combination of things: tickets available, a client from a friend, then the client saying they wanted me to come, and then CNN finding out that I'm there. So I will do CNN from there. Knock on wood, you won't see me often, but I have been doing planning and preparation for a client that's a major player in the Olympics. But I'm not working for the Paris Olympic Committee directly. But I know this is a very complicated security event. The opening ceremony is first time Summer Olympics opening ceremony is not going to be in a stadium. It's on the Seine River with the boats and so there's a sniper on. I mean, talk about being ready. There's a sniper on every building. Right. They're being public about this. Hundreds of thousands of law enforcement, military. They've closed off a section of the Seine as of last Friday, known as the Silt Zone. You actually have to have a QR code to get into it. It is going to be crazy. So I'm there for work, but I have tickets for fun, and fingers crossed I get to at least see a beach volleyball on Saturday.
I have to say, we haven't seen any of the events yet. It hasn't started yet, but just from everything I've read, it seems like France has really done amazing work, and they made it green. They made it climate change sensitive.
Are you trying to put salt on my wound about Boston 2024?
It seems spectacular that they, just apart from anything else, that they have really done what they were supposed to do.
Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's going to be lots of criticisms about it, about homelessness and the hotels and the cost of Olympics. There's obviously a heightened threat environment, but thank God that the French did not vote for a right-wing government. That was our concern like a month ago. It's like, oh my God, if you have a semi-neo-Nazi leadership, that's not going to go over well because there'd be protests. There were protests against the Olympics because there was going to be Palestinian protests regarding the war in Israel. So there's going to be lots of activity. I'm not going to pretend like it's all going to be like, oh, everyone's so happy. But
given the challenges, it does seem.
If given 8-10 years, the difference between a city able to focus its efforts in terms of green infrastructure investments, growth, and other issues. Paris is that example. And that was the example that those of us who were on the Boston 2024 effort really hoped for this city.
We could have done this, right?
Well, I'll just put it a different way. The people who, I'm not apologetic about it. We made mistakes. We didn't deliver well to the community. We had community backlash. We should have taken a deep breath and made our case better looking back at it. But the idea, as the critics of it who said we need to spend our efforts on infrastructure and housing and other issues that ail Boston, should look around and see how much
progress we haven't made.
I love the city, but I mean, maybe it takes a galvanizing force to become a global city.
That's true.
But I mean that phony mythology, narrative that was given about, this.
We have other
if
priorities.
we don't do the Olympic, if we don't fund the Marines, let's fund the school districts. Like it is, to be sophisticated in a global economy requires being sophisticated about how you're going to get stuff done. And the only way you were going to get it done was with a deadline, and that deadline would have been this summer.
Did you see Shirley Lung's
I love her.
on this?
I do.
She was a big champion for the
Olympics.
Olympics.
And she knows exactly. Did you read the quote that one quote from saying,
we goofed. Boston procrastinates without a deadline. Boston procrastinates.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great quotes.
I mean, goofed. I mean, there's nowhere to go, and the people that were critical of us, where are they? Where are they? Where are they? Yeah, like
Chris Dempsey.
Andrew
Look
Zimmerlin
around
from
you. Smith College. But their point was that other cities that have done this, with the exception of Los Angeles, who had a lot of the structure there in the first place, from your home state, California, have lost money big time.
It's
her
more,
point
but
is
the long term,
And Here's point that we would do nothing about. The Red Line is not better. The housing has not been built.
That was the promise Chris and those guys made, and it's dream on. I mean, I think it is such a wishful thinking about the way that this city would work. Look, I don't have the counter, right? I mean, in other words, it could have been a total disaster if they had gone forward with this. But the idea that if you don't commit to Boston 2024, somehow you're going to fix these issues I just think the evidence is clear now. Paris may prove the example, it may not. There's going to always be data pointing one way or the other. Also, it would have been a great imprint for the city,
right?
Yeah,
and
for a different city. Yeah,
the permanence of the green initiatives.
But instead, we have your favorite trial, which is a global phenom. Instead of Boston 2024, we get the retrial. Yeah, let's just that will be our image to the globe. I love it.
But it is funny though.
You get it again. You get 2025. I hear.
Coming back in
and Netflix. I mean, it's never going away.
But isn't it incredible? What does it say that there are dozens of people who are totally wrapped up in the Karen Reed trial? She's the woman accused of running over her boyfriend, the Boston police officer, John O'Keefe, who was guardian to 2 kids. That people get so worked up about that, and other things seem to leave us cold. I'll say one thing with the Parisians. They protest everything.
Oh, no, you should see. I get the security documents. It's like, you actually can't, it's like, actually, there's so many protests, but I mean, look, we'll see what happens in Paris, knock on wood. There's obviously, look, I'm looking behind you now. There's obviously a huge threat environment, but it's just it was a different way of thinking about the city. Lots of debates, nothing's perfect, lots of evidence going both ways. But I think the idea that there was an alternative path for Boston 10 years later, I think the proof is clear. The Red Line's not better, housing's not better, transportation
But we
is
do
not.
this. We do that all the time. We say we don't want to do something, and the reason we give for it is that the money could be better spent elsewhere, and then we proceed to not spend it. It's like creating a task force. It's the equivalent of creating a task force, so you don't have to deal with a law.
Anyway, it's a huge loss for us, I think.
Okay, we have a little sound here, a clip from Juliette Cayon's new documentary about tornadoes. It's called American Tornadoes, Minutes to Survive, Years to Rebuild. Here it is.
Jordan Hall is a man on a mission.
That's Miles.
My goal is to shoot close range, insane video and sell it to the news networks.
With great success, he captures amazing videos for My Radar.
Is he a chaser?
Yeah, but that was not
Miles O'Brien.
No, that's like my partner in crime. So Miles O'Brien and I. This is our third documentary for My Radar. We spent a week, in Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago on both the science and the recovery from tornadoes. It was the worst tornado season in Oklahoma. So that is on My Radar on YouTube. He did a piece for it for Miles O'Brien. People know as PBS long-term and famous. Oh my God. His whole team is just amazing. He's the science reporter. I'm sorry you didn't have my clip because that's my perfected PBS voice documentary hosting PBS. Yeah, no, I mean it was
give
like
us a sample.
I can't even. You have to listen to it. I'm not. It took a while, but it was a great effort, and people who know weather know My Radar. Like many weather companies, they are very much getting into climate change, but we explore how science is giving us time in terms of your ability to respond and then what recovery looks like. And I went to Sulphur, Oklahoma, which just lost its entire downtown a couple weeks ago. What does it look like a couple weeks later? So it's an important effort. We had a great time doing it. And then obviously the Twisters movie, it's not.
Right. The Twister movie.
I saw it yesterday, yeah.
What'd you think?
So fantastic.
Was it fantastic?
I know, but you know
that
what?
That was a sequel to the first.
Well, yeah, it doesn't really
two.
tie to it. It's just like a part two, and it's like.
Should we see it in IMAX theaters?
You absolutely. I saw it at Fresh Pond matinee with my girlfriend, who also likes to sneak out in the middle of the day. I kept saying it's work, but we saw like a 1:40 p.m. And we were like, there was like 4 people in the movie theater. It was so fun, but it is. I like thriller, big blockbusters. When COVID ended, it was like the one thing I was like, I really want to get that back into my life. And it's just you have to see it on that. And there's a whole. Well, it's a spoiler alert one day, but there's a whole way that it ends that is not typical of your normal romantic disaster movie.
Okay, so first of all, when are we going to be able to see this?
It's online now. It's on My Radar and YouTube, and then the piece from NewsHour would be on NewsHour's PBS, and then all other sort of places.
And why was the worst climate year in Oklahoma?
They can't relate. They can't relate it to climate change.
Okay.
So and we're honest about that. That you just have these years. The last EF5 was on the globe was in 2013. We went back to that town. It's called Moore, and what it's done to prepare for the next one. EF5 is, those of you who've seen the movie know that tornadoes are measured by wind speed, but they are given a number by their destructive impact, the DI, so the damage impact. So this was an EF5, which is just you can't survive it if you're in it, and so we don't know what the reason is, but we know that. Let me put it a different way. The reason why it's worse is because El Nino. You cannot ascribe that to climate change because that's a pattern thing.
We're almost out of time here, but one last question. We've had tornadoes around here.
Yeah.
We had one in Springfield. It was about 10 years ago.
That was bad, though. Didn't someone?
It was bad. Yeah, it was
Didn't
bad.
one touch down in Revere? Not too long ago?
Could be.
Yeah, but these are probably like EF
little
zeros.
Tiny ones.
Yeah.
Tiny ones.
The one in Springfield was pretty big. We talked to a guy, Jim and I, this is when we were doing commercial radio, a guy that held on to the newel and the banister with his hands, and his feet were up in the air, getting sucked into the tornado.
Wow.
And he did survive, but his whole house was gone.
lost. Yeah, that's I met people for the documentary. I meet people who lost their whole house. But they have storm shelters.
But what is there a concern here that we should?
There shouldn't be. I mean, I would
Okay.
assume that's going to be Twisters 3, as like for Boston or New York is the community. But it's interesting. Oklahoma. Because Oklahoma is in Tornado Alley, it has NOAA is there, National Weather Service is there. There's a whole facility tied to the University of Oklahoma and people who are studying, high damage incidents to try to give more warning and alerts. And it just happens to be in Oklahoma for obvious reasons. So we went there, and then the name of the cafe where Miles and I have a bunch of scenes is called the Flying Cow Cafe. For those of you who remember Twisters 1, one of the most famous lines in movies is when Helen Hunt is looking out and there's the cow flies across the front of their windshield and she goes, "Cow."
Yeah. Oh my God, the poor cow.
I know. It's great though. I mean, it's its destructive power is overwhelming, and I had never quite experienced that. I mean, I went to Sulphur. We did the documentary 6 weeks after the tornado had touched down, and debris alone is gonna keep them from building. But the hopeful part of the story is what Miles covered in terms of scientists getting a better understanding, so that you could have more time, and then the lessons learned about communicating, what are you telling people when, and how do you rebuild? And it's the simplest things in the world. I mean, don't put your nails 6 inches apart, put them 4 inches apart. Well, that's going to keep, every person we talked about connectivity of the building, that the tornado does not destroy a building in total, it destroys it piece by piece, so if you can keep the pieces together. So I walk around with a builder. I'm like, I know.
Wait a minute, so the whole building gets picked up like
no,
the
it
cow?
Doesn't. No, it doesn't work though. It's like if it can get in the garage, then it's like taking pieces. So your goal is it's like to glue a puzzle piece together. And that's what they're looking for. So I spent some time with a builder as well. So it's really fun.
All right, just want to make sure I don't have to
on
worry.
YouTube, my radar, my Twitter feed, lots of Twitter feeds, lots of lots of streaming feeds, so you can just look it up.
Can't wait to see it.
Congrats.
Yeah,
it's called American Tornadoes, I think. Yes.
American Tornadoes, minutes to survive.
Love it. You've had it right there.
Years to rebuild.
Yes.
I say this with completely appropriate sarcasm. Have fun in Paris.
I will.
Good to see you.
I'm going to give you bye. I'll see you after Paris.
All right.
Until Paris. I'll send pictures.
Time. Bye. Thank you, Juliet.
We've been speaking with national security expert Juliet Kayyem. She's the former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Barack Obama and the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Her latest book is The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters. Up next, Bay State Banner publisher Ron Mitchell and managing editor Jamira Perry. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
California's newest state park is kind of like a time machine.
The plains were once laser-level fields that grew alfalfa or a rotation of corn and winter wheat.
Now that land has been transformed back to the floodplain it once was. Hear how Dos Rios is helping protect downriver communities from flooding while bringing back native wildlife. On All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Frontline PBS, presenting Two American Families, 1991 to 2024. A documentary about the fading promise of the American dream. Now on the PBS app, YouTube, and Frontline.org. And Heal Veterinary Clinic in Watertown, committed to providing their clients with conversation-focused visits and caring for pets with low-stress animal handling techniques. Heal Vet, a better experience for you and your pet. Heal.vet.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Andrea Cabral is in for Jim today, and here with us at the Boston Public Library. And we are joined now live at the library by Bay State Banner owner and publisher Ron Mitchell, and their brand new,
a little 2 months almost.
And where did you come from? Where were you working before you got here?
So I came from Philadelphia, and I worked at the Philadelphia Tribune, which is one of the largest Black publications in the country. and also WRD, which is one of 3 Black-owned news talk stations in the country.
Very nice, very nice. Well, I hope you're getting settled in, and welcome. Nice to have you.
Thank you, thank you.
We are so happy to have Jamira. She is the culmination of a full year-long search. So we looked long and hard for somebody to come in and help continue our mission, and Jamira lined up perfectly with our goals, and she's been just amazing since she came in.
And News Talk, right at home, and News Talk, right? We are News Talk right here. So I don't know who wants to talk about this. Which one of you wants to talk about the new editorial that was written about Biden being out and Harris being in? Ron or Jamira?
Well, that was my editorial, so I'll take this one first.
I'll take this one first. Go ahead. What do you have to say?
I mean, we are very excited. We, as a paper, are very excited about the change in the Democratic Party. It was obviously needed after that less than stellar performance by President Biden, and I think that it was one of the most monumental things that he could have done. In a long history of really good political choices, and everybody makes some mistakes on the way, but Biden has really been a very brilliant politician, and I think the way that he did it, stepping down, I know there was a lot of pressure on him, but I think that it created a groundswell and catapulted him. And then what happened with the larger meeting with I think it was 48,000 African-American women on a joint Zoom call in support of her, and that just created that juggernaut that we've seen with the fundraising. And
I can tell, I got an invite. I couldn't make the call, but I got an invite. I said I couldn't make it. The people were texting and giving updates to people who couldn't make it. And was that the phone call that raised $1.5 million on the phone call?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great editorial, but I think that it's like, to your point, it's about the energy. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember the last time in politics, although I feel like we've been like this with politics for so long, the last time this kind of spark was lit and the response was like this from like all corners.
it reminds me of Obama's campaign,
me too.
But
Me
this
too.
was quicker.
Right.
This was quicker.
Instantaneous, like the night of.
But the Democrats needed that. I mean, as a Democrat, and I don't like to talk too much in my personal politics, but the Democratic Party was definitely in a tailspin.
I think people were looking for change, and so as soon as they saw it, they latched onto it and embraced it.
Hung on like grim death. This is change. We need change, yeah.
Right.
She's also amazing. You know, brilliant, amazing prosecutor, right person for the right time. I think what the last candidate we had, who was a woman, she took a lot of the brunt. Hillary took a lot of the brunt and a lot of the pain. And I think because of what she went through, now America should be ready. And is ready, and also based on what we're looking at, where we have an administration that's going to take away women's rights. It's already done everything they can to take away not just women's rights, but civil rights, equal rights. So I think that what's on the line, the person who's in the who's now our candidate as a Democrat, not speaking as a publisher.
And you make the point that because I think you made it because you didn't want it to be lost in all of this, is that Biden had an incredibly successful presidency, and that's the record, that administration's record. She gets to run on that because she was part of it. And that's, you could get change, right? Anybody could have represented change, but change with a record to run on is hard to come by in presidential politics.
And don't also forget, when her time in office as a politician by herself, she did a lot.
Right.
So that's not to be forgotten or lost in all of this either.
I said yesterday, she has more executive and legislative experience at both the state and federal level than 99% of the people who've endorsed her.
Well, there was also a call for black men this week,
Next
too.
day, yep.
And I wondered about, because there's been a lot of talk that Biden was losing support among young Latino men, young black men. So what does this mean for those young black men, do you think? I mean, there's a sexism angle there. Of course. But,
I believe, and I was invited to that call, I wasn't able to be on it as well, but I do believe that, you guys asked about this the last time I was on the show, and I told you, I don't really think the folks who are answering those surveys are really the real representative of African-American men in this country. Most African-American men I know have jobs not at home answering surveys. So I think that it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but this certainly energizes the whole base, and African-American men are going to stand behind Kamala. This, I know the vice presidential candidate on the Republican side was talking about, okay, this is
He has no idea what he's talking
here
about.
in America, African-American diaspora is made up of all sorts of different African diaspora countries, so, That's really the truth about it. We are all black Americans. She went to HBCU, she pledged a sorority, she chose, her dominant, I don't want to say dominant, but she chose to make sure she identified herself as a black woman, and we accept people where they are. So, she is a black woman, and I know black men will support her. I'm quite sure of it.
And the energy, as you say, has been absolutely huge about her.
Right.
I think the problem for Obama is we first saw him, he had those big ears, in the debate, and I thought, my goodness, I don't know about this guy. And then all of a sudden, he just became electric. I don't know when that first happened, but I remember not thinking.
Well, I thought it happened in 2004 when he gave the speech at the convention here.
That's what he was.
Great.
Yeah.
He was great that night. He was great that night, but it took me a while to warm up to him.
You could tell then that he was going to.
Yeah, and then it's Michelle.
Right.
We all love Michelle. So anyway, this is some neat thing that I probably should have known about, and I didn't. This whole Life Sciences Center in Nubian Square, you wrote about that too, Ron.
Yes, I did. I did write about that as well. And the Life Sciences Center, there's a Blair Lot development that's coming in Nubian Square, shepherded by Richard Taylor, a black developer in Boston. And there was a $500 million section of the $3 billion state budget. And out of that $3 billion, $500 million were going to go to helping to develop a life sciences building within his development. It's a $200 million development. And the folks who were going to be providing the folks who were going to be providing education in that facility was Northeastern, as well as various other schools. RCC, Northeastern, Mass Bioed, as well as Washington.
I think Wentworth.
Franklin Cummings Institute.
Yeah.
So a whole bunch of different schools were going to teach within that facility. And it was in the House Appropriations Bill that passed the House, but then it went to the Senate and it came out. They took it out in the Senate. So my whole philosophy is that that's a $3 billion bill that's designed to help life sciences around the state, to support that industry, and to not be willing to spend such a small percentage of it to create an educational facility, especially in the heart of Roxbury, where a lot of opportunity for life science education doesn't already exist. It's just an oversight. It's short-sighted. We want to support life sciences. Massachusetts is a life science mecca, one of the biggest concentration of biotech companies and life science companies in the country, and it does make a lot of sense to support and create that much of a support for those businesses. $3 billion is a lot.
So Jamara, what will it take to get it in? The conference processes. I know you just got here, but the conference process you'll find out in Massachusetts is really quite something to behold. What is it going to take to get it back into whatever the compromise bill emerges from both houses? And do you know who's pushing for it to get back into the bill?
I'm still learning about that process a little bit.
I'm sorry if I asked you.
No, it's perfectly fine. It's so funny. I was actually reading up about how all this works here yesterday, and I was just like, this is so interesting.
Yeah, we can torture a process in Massachusetts.
I didn't want to say that, but kind of, yeah. It seemed very labor heavy, and it seemed like there could be an easier way, but yeah.
Well, I think it might. I know Lydia Edwards is very big on the bill. Senator Lydia Edwards. I have to believe that she's one of the people who is probably pushing it. But if it did, do you have any sense, Ron?
I know that John Moran and China Taylor also.
Oh, so he's on the rep side doing it.
On the rep side. China Taylor. I know that. I know that Liz Miranda was involved as well.
What will happen if it doesn't get in the bill? What's the future?
If it doesn't end up in the conciliatory funding, then it doesn't, then they have to go back and try again, I guess, next.
But I think
but there won't be a bill to attach it to, right?
No.
I know that it's in conference now and being considered. If it doesn't get attached to this bill, I'm not exactly sure what. I guess you have to go back and try again from the beginning, all over again. But it is in conference and they are considering it. So
we don't want to depress you since you just got here.
No, it's okay. But I just want to say though, I think it's important to keep it in the zeitgeist, to keep people talking about it, to make sure you talk to your representatives and don't let it die.
That's right. The number is 617-722-2000. I spent half my life saying that because the Massachusetts legislature, one of the least effective in the country, doesn't do anything that they should.
That was not me, Jamira Perry.
And they have control over things they should have no control over, like liquor licenses in Boston.
But they listen if they get phone calls.
They do.
Exactly.
If you call, even if you don't know your state rep or state senators, you just call that number, you say what town you're in, and they'll hook you up. And when they get some calls, they'll be upset. But this is a no-brainer, it seems to me. And I can't believe the way way they fiddle and diddle around there. And by the way, people should read the Globe series about everything they don't do, that they do when they should be taking care of business, which is like going to a cigar bar in the North End and spending thousands of dollars on very expensive liquor.
Right. But you know what? What happens is those kinds of exposés get written. There's a momentary outrage. And the reason that they get written again, because the spending has happened again, is because we forget and we move on. And we don't sort of focus. And we've gotten, in part because the legislature in Massachusetts, as you will see, has become very sort of insular. We don't do open debate anymore. We don't have people on the floor, banging their fists on a podium, really trying to champion a cause. It all gets done between the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, and they make their decisions and everybody falls in line. And that's a big part of why you can get away with not taking a fraction of such a huge, multi-billion-dollar bill and creating a life sciences education facility. And what people should understand about it, I wanted to put it in context. Explain to people what it means in terms of closing the wage gap, and what it means in terms of creating more equity. And even if you can weave in some of what we see, just even life expectancy differences between the Back Bay and here, and I don't expect you to know this, Jamira, because you just got here, but between you and Ron, talk a little bit about the long-term benefit, is why people are so big on this.
There's a tremendous economic gap between people of color and non-people of color in Massachusetts. There were multiple reports that came out in 2018. The Globe did a large report. There's been an update. And the wealth gap is tremendous. There are different nonprofit organizations, including the Bar Foundation, that's spending a lot of money trying to help breach that wealth gap. And what life science education can do is it provides career jobs for families, so it helps that family to create stability, allow them to buy a home, allow them to put their kids in college. It is a life-changing experience if you can give an opportunity to an individual to learn a life skill that in an industry that is so prominent in our state. These are multiple $100,000 a year jobs that can exist, and they range from $50,000 up to hundreds and hundreds of thousands, depending on how far along an individual goes into those life sciences studies. I mean, these are great career jobs, and there's a whole dearth of them. There's a whole vacuum. All of these companies need to fill these jobs, and there's a need. There's another article came out recently talking about the need and how they're constantly looking. They look all around the world to fill these jobs right here in Massachusetts. We have all these wonderful folks right here at home who need jobs, and we need to be training them and providing them those opportunities. And this is a pittance compared to the total amount of that bill. $50 million may sound like a lot, but when you think about all of that $300 billion, that $3 billion is going to companies to help them be successful. Why wouldn't we want to spend a small portion to provide them the employees they need to be successful?
Right.
It's a no-brainer.
Right. We're talking to the Bay State Banner's owner and publisher Ron Mitchell and managing editor Jamira Perry. Let's talk about something neat that's going on.
Did you want to weigh in on that, Jamira?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Sorry.
It's okay. You were talking about the totality of all of it, right? So the Life Sciences Center is important, but also we did an article recently about the health gaps that exist between, like you said, the Back Bay and
Roxbury.
Right. And it's amazing that all these factors you don't necessarily think of, but the wage gap impacts that, and how people are treated in the doctor's office and if they're listened to. So in communities of color, they found that people are dying from cancers that are preventable. They're dying from diabetes and heart disease and all these things that are easily addressed. And they're addressed everywhere else, so we have to take a look at why they aren't being addressed in these community of colors.
Yeah, a lot of racism in medicine
Yeah.
we've talked about before, and I think the percentage of physicians who are African Americans is like something like 5%.
Yes,
It's
5%.
tiny.
And the other thing is when you have a job, a good job in a field in which you've been trained, right? You have more money and more resources for self-care and for medical care and to seek out the kind of care that you need. You're not necessarily robbing Peter to pay Paul. And so it's all connected. To your point, it's all connected.
Okay, Jamira, I don't want to cut you off again. Are you ready to move on to something neat that's going on at the paper with this good news Banner About Town deal?
Yeah, so Banner Around Town is my little baby. I started it when I came here because I found myself going out to try and explore the city, getting to know Boston a little bit better. And there's so much going on in the city, and there's so many good stories, and I feel like we all need a little bit of good news in our lives. So it's something that's really important to me, and we try and go to as many events as possible. We can't get to them all, but we try. So we do have community support, and they'll send in their photos and stuff to help us acknowledge some of the events that we can't get to.
And there was a great event this weekend that you went to.
Yes, we had the Black Family Reunion run by Boston While Black. There was 10,000 people that came through there. It was from noon to 9, so they weren't all there at once, but you know.
Go Sheena, go Sheena, go Sheena.
The amazing Sheena Collier runs that.
Yeah.
Where was it?
The lawn on D.
Yeah.
Okay. Right over by the waterfront.
Good open space. That's good open green space.
This is your second year, I believe.
And it was a really cool event because it was a family event, but there was line dancing, there was karaoke, speed dating, and it was
speed dating. I love it.
Right?
Yeah.
Line dancing. There was things for the kids, lawn games, and it was just a really fun communal atmosphere.
So how, if people want to send independently, sort of like are going to events and want to share them with the banner, how do they do that?
They can reach out to us via, they can slide in our DMs on Instagram. They can also info@BayStateBanner.com.
Yeah, info@BayStateBanner.com. And I encourage everybody, Jim's not here. I know he's out today.
Here.
But he always reminds me, BayStateBanner.com.
Yes.
That is a wonderful website. When we came and me and Andre bought the paper a year and a half ago, we spent a lot of time in the very beginning upgrading our website and adding a whole bunch of streaming content and a whole bunch of other things. It is a wonderful website. It reads easy. And now with Jamara, who's got an expertise in that side of the field as well, not just print, but digital journalism, we've been able to continue to upgrade that website and make it even more interactive.
I will say the banner moved into the digital space very, very nicely. Very nicely.
And the art displays I am particularly fond of. But this sounds really neat too. This reunion of Boston radio personalities. What's this going to be
Ron,
about?
you know this took me back, right?
Yeah.
That was those were my Boston college days.
I didn't mention it in the article, but I worked at ILD in the 80s.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I met a lot of friends who I still know today from that time of the 80s. Yeah, I was in sales back then.
Well, I was going to say, I was just about to say, that's really funny that he's here. I was going to say, our current sheriff, Steve Tompkins, who's here, by the way, worked with Stephen Hill. They had he and Mike King, Mel King's son, had a program called Video Visions. And Stephen Hill was the host, promoted it on ILD all the time. And it was, I still have cards from, because Steve and I go back to Boston College, still have cards from Video Visions. But ILD was the station.
ILD was AM station, sunrise to sunset AM station, like the old FCC licenses were. But it was Boston's black-owned radio station. Ken Nash owned it, and it went back all the way to the early 60s, and it was a place that R&B was played before all of the other radio stations started to play it. And the radio DJs go back to some of Boston's greats, not just Elroy, Mike, not just Elroy, not just Sonny Joe White, but there's a whole list of superstars. And then, of course, Stephen Hill, who was a program director there, who went on to do wonderful things with BET and various other production companies. Stephen, you see his name on not Academy Award, but various award shows. He's just so connected and productive in the business. So ILD was a training ground and a proving ground for a whole bunch of the top DJs in entertainment.
It's nice that you're doing the reunion and handing out
Elroy created it. We're just sponsoring. Elroy, R.C. Smith, Elroy created it. He called me a while back, wanted to bring it to Boston, and I've been working with him, so we're happy to be a sponsor. And it's an amazing event that Elroy
I think there'll be a huge turnout.
So if people are interested in this, what do they do?
They can go to our website, BayStateBanner.com. We have a pop-up ad. You can go directly to buy tickets. It might be sold out already, but I encourage folks to come to BayStateBanner.com.
If it is sold out and you can't make it, we will be having lots of photos and content on our social. So make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Bay State Banner.
So, Jamara, do you have a rent shock when you moved from Philadelphia to Boston?
Oh, yes. I sure did. So much so, I looked into it and researched it a little bit and had actually one of my reporters write a story on it because during my research, I saw how the housing market is not really built for people looking for housing. Yeah. Which is kind of crazy.
In Philadelphia, which I think has just taken off since I was a kid. I mean, now there's so many neat things going on. The big boulevards, the little tiny streets, all the great food, and the reasonable rents.
I mean, I didn't think it was reasonable when I lived there, but now I sure do. I surely do think it's reasonable now. But so in the article that's coming out tomorrow, we looked at why things were so high, what's being done about it, and affordable housing. What actually is affordable housing? Because the parameters that they're using for it aren't that affordable. Because you can make $80,000 and as a single person and still have trouble paying your rent.
Insane.
Isn't it great when your actual life gets to inform on your professional life? That you'll find that happens a lot in Massachusetts.
Honestly, that's how I got into journalism. I was curious and kept asking questions, and then finally my mom was like, "Go find out and tell me." And then I was like, later on, I was like, "I can get paid for this?
Right.
That's amazing."
This for a living.
Right?
It was great to have you both.
Thank you so much for coming, and congratulations for all your great work at the Banner. It's really something. Thank you very much.
We've been speaking with Bay State Banner's owner and publisher Ron Mitchell and new managing editor Jamira Perry. Up next, the executive directors of 2 of our local watersheds join us to talk about protecting water quality in Boston Harbor and beyond Boston Harbor, especially during a climate crisis. You're listening to
We're in unfamiliar political waters.
President Biden has dropped out of the race.
Biden made his decision public in a letter published on social media.
He says, quote, "I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down."
President Biden will address the nation this evening about what lies ahead and how he plans to finish out his term. Join us tonight at 8 for President Biden's White House address here on GBH 89.7, online at gbhnews.org.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the Adventure Park at Heritage Museums and Gardens. Zip line and climbing trails for all ages, 7 days a week this summer, rain or shine. More at myadventurepark.com.
And the University of Massachusetts Amherst, dedicated to generating new knowledge and applying discoveries to the betterment of society. You can learn more about research, innovation, and economic impact for the Commonwealth at umass.edu.
I'm Nicole Garcia, producer for BPR, and you're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm chatting here with the guests. I should have my microphone on my head, but now I do. Okay. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We are speaking now. We're very excited about this. Andrea is in for Jim Browdy. You've probably figured that out. We're at the Boston Public Library. So the passage of the Clean Water Act, 52 intense rain, more common. Can we ever reach the point of safely swimming in the Charles? We are joined now to try to answer that question by Emily Norton, Executive Director of the Charles River Watershed Association, who brought me and Jim and Andrea nice little caps. We're very excited about that. And Patrick Heron, Executive Director of the Mystic River Watershed Association. Patrick and Emily, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so excited to talk to you both.
I happen to know Emily as a city councilor, Newton City Councilor extraordinaire, who was very, very welcoming and informative and knowledgeable when I worked for Ascend. But it's a pleasure to have both of you here, and I want to tell you that preparing for your segment, I learned a tremendous amount that I feel kind of guilty. I didn't know any, very little, next to nothing about the water quality issues in Massachusetts. And we're going to start now with the beaches. Now, every year you see the news stories, there are bacteria blooms, and you hear that this one's closed or that one's closed. You tend to pay attention to, if it's a local beach, something near you. This list is enormous. So you guys can decide which one wants to start first, but let's talk about the beach closures and why they're happening.
Well, that's such a great question, and thank you again for hosting us today. Long-time listener, first-time guest, so really excited to be here. Much. And this question of beaches is one that's really dear to our heart in the Mystic. We have a beach, Shannon Beach, on Upper Mystic Lake, which on a regular day, Upper Mystic Lake is just spectacular water quality and great. But it's when it rains that you see the mixture of everything that comes off of that land surface, that pavement, as well as what happens underground with these pipes intermingling with each other. Yes, the stormwater pipe and the sewage pipe are sometimes talking to each other. And so as we are coming into a climate future right now, where we have more frequent rainfall and more intense rainstorms, we're seeing more pollutants coming into our water bodies, and that's showing up on our beaches, where the state has a very active program to test for fecal bacteria indicators like E. coli or Enterococcus. So we're seeing this at Shannon Beach, where last summer they closed the beach the whole summer. And we are a little critical of the practice that the state has of a geometric mean. So we think that there is a need to revisit how we're actually closing these beaches over time, because most of those pollutants do wash away in a few days, but the current system actually grandfathers in data that can be 5 weeks old. So more than anything, it's just shining a light on the need that we all have to invest in the infrastructure in our communities to protect public health.
So Emily,
go ahead, Emily.
No, I was just going to say, when you're answering the question, I know that you are a policy person. One of the reasons I love Emily is because we're both policy people. Talk about how the policy merges with what Tom is saying about the state, the way the state closes the beaches. Where is the policy solution to that?
So I won't speak to the policy so much because I don't know as much as Patrick does on that issue. I can tell you that for those who listen in and out and might just pop in and not listen to the whole segment, it's really important for people to have the takeaway that this problem is solvable. This is infrastructure. So back in the day, when Boston was first developed, you had privies, outhouses. It was a big advance to have stormwater pipes built under the streets, carrying waste directly to the river, directly to the harbor. Over time, the population grows, we fill in more land. We actually filled in a lot of Boston, not so much for development, although that ended up being a benefit, but to cover the sewage. Areas of Boston, there were odor maps. Back in the day, they thought that odor was how disease was transmitted, and so it was disgusting. If you read the old reports about life in Boston during the summers, it was pretty unpleasant. The Emerald Necklace, the Back Bay Fens, that was actually a sewer management project by Olmsted. The the damming of the Charles River, creating a lower basin. It used to be a tidal estuary. The original reason for doing that was to cover up the sewage. So sewage has really, I'm a mom of 3 boys, so I get to talk about poop all the time anyway. But poop has really had a huge impact on Boston's development and really on what, just not to gross people out further, but when there are big rainstorms and you flush here in Boston Public Library, it ends up in the Charles River. So this is very personal, if you will.
Because we're close.
Okay. Because you're close, and this area still has a catchment area let me finish my story there. So it was an advanced sewer system, but what they did in those days was they had one pipe for both household wastewater and stormwater, which is really just rain hitting the ground and getting into the storm drain. So that worked for a while. And then it went straight into the Charles, and then eventually they redirected it, went straight into wastewater treatment. But what happens nowadays is that where you have those combined pipes, when it's dry weather, no problem. Everything goes to Deer Island. When we have big rainstorms, which we are having more and more of thanks to climate change, that's when the pipe capacity can't handle the rainwater and the household waste. And if we did not let it discharge into the Charles, it would back up into people's homes, the streets. So to their credit, the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, which was created after the lawsuits of the 1980s, they've spent literally billions of dollars on building Deer Island and sewer separation projects and a lot of other technical solutions that have reduced sewage significantly. In the Charles, over 90%. The problem is the remaining translated last year into a month of days it was not safe even to boat, much less swimming. So that's really the situation. This is solvable. It is an infrastructure problem, but unless people speak out and speak up, and I'll just give a little plug for our cutthecrapcharles.org website. We're so subtle. Did I mention I'm a mom of 3 boys? And so there are things we can do, but our leaders need to hear that the public wants to make those investments.
Okay, I know, Patrick, you're with the Mystic River watershed, and Emily, you're with the Charles River watershed. Let's talk about those, and then we can separate oceans like beaches that are on the ocean and lakes and kettle ponds. What is going on the Mystic?
Well, just for context, in the Boston Harbor, we have 3 major river systems coming in. The Charles River is the largest. It's right in the middle. Then we have the Mystic River on the north, and then we have the Neponset on the south. And right now, it's only the Mystic and the Charles that have combined sewer overflows at this time. And so, I think the big issue we're talking about right now is the need to invest in this infrastructure. The MWRA and the relevant parties are kind of closing out their first case. And now we're beginning to plan for that next set of investments. And quite frankly, they haven't quite closed out that case. They're still not making the grade for the about 16 combined sewer overflow sites that are still discharging more frequently and more volume. In the Mystic, it's even more egregious in some ways. This is a prime environmental justice community, and this is an environmental justice issue. That if you grow up in a community that has twice as many people of color or twice as much poverty, you will have 3 or 4 times as much combined sewer overflows in your community. So in this case, Alewife Brook is the site of the largest amount of untreated combined sewer overflows in all of Boston. It's to environmental justice communities. And believe it or not, it's actually overflowing the banks. People are pushing their baby strollers through it. And so there's a tremendous need for investment. And I think, to Emily's point, this is a point where people can shrug their shoulders, or they can say, this isn't how we want to live, and get involved, talk to your electeds, et cetera.
So this is a problem of the legislature being willing to spend this money? I mean, I'm old enough to remember the MWRA situation, and I was one of those reporters that got in the boat and we drove around Boston Harbor, and it looked like a science experiment from high school where the water was bubbling. It was really disgusting and it smelled terrible, but there was massive political opposition to the MWRA project because of the money it was going to cost. Is that where we are, kind of part 2?
Money is always a problem, and when the MWRA was founded, among their founding principles was that they would keep rates low. Back then, if we had asked the public, do you think it's worthwhile to spend over $4 billion on cleaning up the harbor and cleaning up the rivers? I don't know what the answer would be. Would anyone here in the audience raise your hand if you don't think it's worth it that we spent that money and transformed the quality of life in Greater Boston? I remember when I was a kid growing up in Newton, the river smelled like sewage.
Yeah.
The harbor smelled like sewage. There was literally 9 feet of sewage in the Boston Harbor. Next time you're near the harbor, go look out at that huge water body and imagine 9 feet of sewage there. But especially, Marjorie, I know how passionate you are about addressing climate change and environmental issues. We have come so far. We have reduced it over 90%. We now have the Esplanade, we have the Seaport. Now the Seaport has other issues, but you wouldn't have put your gleaming commercial new building next to the harbor in those days. So we have done an extraordinary thing. So what we're saying, what Patrick and I are saying is, let's finish the job. Imagine it's hot and you want to just go jump in the river, whatever income level you're at, you have a river in Boston that you can just go jump in on these hot summer days. We don't have that now, and we should be demanding that, and we can have it. So I don't think it's a matter of money. I do think it is a matter of awareness and political will.
So now, my perception of part of the challenge of this, beyond the money and getting legislators to actually act, is that we believe in Massachusetts that our water quality is pretty good, right? I mean, I talk with my brother in California all the time. I'm a 0 water filter pitcher person. I only drink water that's filtered through that pitcher. It's just a great pitcher for your refrigerator. I sent him one. He goes through the pitchers in a matter of weeks because California has such terrible water. And I measure Massachusetts, and I measure it with the little total dissolved solids thing, and oh my goodness, we're really great out here. And so people the urgency that you're expressing around this, I don't know if that's translating to people who think that, we may have some problems in Massachusetts, but generally our water quality is pretty good. How do you get, there's so many things for us to feel urgent about. How do you get people tuned into this? How do you publicize it and get people to be active at the grassroots level to make these changes?
It's my understanding that coming on to Boston Public Radio is how we do that.
That's but one of the ways.
Everything's going to turn around now.
Yes, yeah. That's true. But I mean, are you thinking in terms of, how to generate better public awareness around this? Because like I said, until I read this to prepare for this segment, I had absolutely no idea.
It is a challenge that people don't read traditional newspapers the way they. So how do you get to people? I wasn't even just trying to blow smoke up your rear. People do listen to Jim and Marjorie, to this show, so that is actually very valuable for us that you're having us on here. But we're trying to figure out is it community blogs? Is it YouTube? Is it whatever? I'm in my 50s, so it's not, So this is something, and we're pretty teeny tiny nonprofits. So the more help we can have from those who can help spread the word. Did I mention cutthecrapcharles.org?
Yes, you did. That's a good one.
But I'll add to this. I just got back from Korea. I was there for 3 weeks, and nobody drinks the water out of the tap in Korea. They all go and buy bottled water or boil the water. And how far we've come in Massachusetts and in the Boston metro area, that everybody trusts what comes out of the tap, because MWRA has delivered tremendous services for drinking water. But the water in our rivers is a different story. We haven't invested to the same level to get to the point where we don't have to go on a website to figure out if they dumped sewage in the river yesterday or last week. And so we have a ways to go, and we passed a law about 2 years ago that asks these communities to report when they dump sewage in the river. And as soon as those reports started coming out, people were outraged when they saw it on the local news. Are you kidding me? My community? I can't believe it. We would never do that. And yet that's what's happening. That's what we're doing.
Okay, let's talk about when the story came out a couple of weeks ago about 37 beaches being closed in the globe. A lot of them were lakes. They were kettle ponds on Cape Cod. Walden Pond has had terrible problems. So my sister and I have been on a cyanobacteria crusade down the Cape, because I'm lucky enough, my father a million years got a cottage down on Lake Wequaquet, second biggest lake on the Cape. First biggest lake is Long Pond and Harwich. They don't have that problem because it's not nearly as developed. But on Wequaquet Lake, it's people that have septic systems that aren't taken care of. It's the runoff, and it's fertilizing lawns. There seems to be a huge amount of ignorance about fertilizing lawns near the water. You want to touch that, Emily? Or
yeah, why don't Patrick, you go first,
okay,
and I'll
Patrick.
jump on.
Yeah, I mean, I think fertilizer on the lawns, especially in the vicinity of beaches, is really a critical issue. And cyanobacteria do create toxins that, if a dog drinks that water, can kill the dog.
Yeah.
And for others of us, some of those health outcomes are yet still being studied. And I'll just call out one more issue, which is dogs. Actually, people and dogs love waterways and love walking along them and local streets. There's a lot of poop that ends up on the street.
They don't clean up.
So that's also a source of the bacteria. And so we do need diligence, but we have to keep these beaches open for people. People need outdoor spaces for their own mental health. They need to recreate to be healthy. And a lot of these beaches are being used by communities like Chelsea, Malden, Everett, where folks have small backyards or up on the second floor. They need this place to go. And if we can't take care of it and invest in our infrastructure and keep the bacteria away, we're harming our populations when we do that.
But they can't. But they can't go in these places when they are polluted, because they will get sick. I mean, you're not saying they should be able to go whether they're.
You know what? We really want people to make informed decisions.
Okay.
And for the most part, we're pretty resilient as adults.
Yeah.
But kids are especially susceptible to gastrointestinal illnesses that can get serious.
Okay. So they can't go in those places. When they're closed, they're closed. Okay. Yeah. What did you want to say, Emily?
I wanted to say that you made a great point about the developed areas. So folks should think about, when you look at your roads, your sidewalks, your buildings, your tennis courts, when the rainwater hits those paved surfaces, it's carrying that water and everything that's on those surfaces straight into your storm drains, straight into your water bodies, untreated. So that is a cause of a lot of these problems. The Cape has the additional issues related to septic, and I know there's talk there about trying to get more sewerage. Yep. So that'll cost money. But in terms of a positive of the investments we'd be making, a lot of the problems that we're seeing related to localized flooding from climate change are also related to the sizing of our stormwater drains. We're not about to rebuild our whole stormwater system in any of our communities. What we can be doing is something called green stormwater infrastructure, and for those on the radio, I'm making air quotes. And basically, that's just bringing nature back into your built environment. Trees can absorb stormwater, rain gardens, bioswales, so that instead of the rainwater being directed straight into a storm drain, it's being directed into the ground. Soil actually cleans water on its way to the groundwater. So this is a way to address heat. This is a way to address flooding. This is a way to really build climate resilience, as well as improve water quality. So for folks who might be concerned about the investments that we're talking about, well, how much is it worth it to you to not have a flooded out basement, to not have your car totaled in a parking lot? This is what happened in the Newton Free Library.
That's right.
August 8th,
yes.
Dozens of cars were totaled. That's how fast the water came. People were in the library. By the time they came out, their car was totaled. So this is our future. This is our present as well as our future. So doing these things, bringing nature back into our built environment that way, is going to be making us safer as well as our rivers cleaner.
So we're almost out of time here. I just want to... go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about in terms of policy. I remember when we were putting the dispensary in Newton, Newton's local regulations and requirements for us, when we redid the parking lot, it was a rain garden. You have to build a drainage system that can withstand a 100-year storm, because we're now getting close to the 100-year storm part. That's what I mean when I talk about the way policy and legislation can force new construction anyway. You might not be able to make it retroactive. New construction to absorb the cost of this infrastructure. And I was really, at the time I was annoyed because it was so expensive, but I looked at it and I thought, you know what? This is really smart.
It's a model, that particular project is a model that we show to others. We can't only rely on development and redevelopment, though. We need to be looking at existing structures. And again, will it cost money? Yes. Is it going to make you safer and make your family and your property safer? Yes. So that is the kind of education that we need to be doing. The way we manage water is vital for keeping us all safe. Folks may not be aware of this, but before Europeans came here, Massachusetts was very watery. You think about the names of a lot of our communities, Watertown, Brookfield, Medway, Medfield, for
Stony
Meadow.
Brook, yeah.
So that's what we need to, we're not going to get back to that, we're not going to get rid of our built environment, but we can use nature and mimic nature, replicate nature to keep us all safer.
Okay, so we only have, like I said, about a minute and a half left here. So Patrick Heron from the Mystic River Watershed, Emily Norton from the Charles River Watershed, tell people what is the most effective thing, if they're listening now, that they can do to try to change this. We'll start with you, Patrick.
Yep. I'll just have one caveat or one additional fact here is we actually can't rest on our laurels. Our modeling for climate change shows that with increased rainfall, our discharge of CSOs is going to multiply by 4 over the next 30 years. So this is the moment to get involved in this public conversation about the next plan to address combined sewer overflows. So at the Mystic River, you can sign on to mysticriver.org, and we will alert you when the next public meetings are, as well as the opportunities to reach out to your legislators, to your municipal staff and officials, and get engaged. Because if the public shrugs their shoulders, so will the cities, so will the agencies, and so will the state. And for the Charles?
Did I mention cutthecrapcharles.org? And then while you're there, wander around the website. There's a lot more information. We didn't get a chance to talk about dam removal and other flooding mitigation strategies, but maybe you'll invite us back.
Absolutely. So people should get on your websites and talk to their local legislators and their state legislators about this kind of stuff. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you
Good
very
to see
much
you.
for coming in.
Thank you for the hats.
And thank you for your great work. It's so important.
It is. We've been speaking with Patrick Heron, Executive Director of the Mystic River Watershed Association, and Emily Norton, Executive Director of the Charles River Watershed Association. To find out more about today's topic, go to mysticriver.org or cutthecrapcharles.org for more information and to find out how to get involved. Up next, we'll look at where Kamala Harris stands on healthcare issues with NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GVH.
California's newest state park is kind of like a time machine.
These floodplains were once laser-level fields that grew alfalfa or a rotation of corn and winter wheat.
Now that land has been transformed back to the floodplain it once was. Hear how Dos Rios is helping protect downriver communities from flooding while bringing back native wildlife. On All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Standish Village in Dorchester's Lower Mills, providing assisted living residents with programs designed to help seniors stay sharp, social, and independent. Learn more at standishvillage.com/programs. And Commonwealth Shakespeare Company, presenting The Winter's Tale, Shakespeare's captivating parable of betrayals and renewed hope, is this summer's free Shakespeare on the Boston Common, July 16th through August 4th. comshakes.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you very much for making me feel good here, Andrea. Okay, we are joined now on Zoom by our medical ethicist, Art Kaplan. He's the Doctors William F. and Virginia Conley Mitty Professor and founding head of the Division of Medical Ethics at NYU School of Medicine in New York City. Hello, Art Kaplan.
Hi, Art.
Hi, I'm just trying to make a U-turn here so I don't have to go to the beach.
I know, it's terrible, terrible.
All right, we're going to open. We want you to listen to this clip because we want to talk to you about where Kamala Harris stands on a bunch of key healthcare issues. We want to remind people by playing this clip of her back when she was California Senator Kamala Harris on day 2 of Judge Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation hearing. Here are a few questions she had for the soon-to-be-confirmed Justice Kavanaugh.
Can you think of any laws that give government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm happy to answer a more specific question. But
male versus female.
There are medical procedures.
Okay. That the government has the power to make a decision about a man's body.
I thought you were asking about medical procedures that are unique to men.
I'll repeat the question. Can you think of any laws that give the government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm not thinking of any right now, Senator.
Of course, the actual answer to that was no, and there never will be.
None.
Yeah. But so on the first healthcare issue, Art, on the issue of reproductive rights, do you think it's pretty clear where Kamala Harris stands on that?
I do, and I think it's also clear that she's going to be more vociferous about reproductive rights than Biden was as a candidate. I didn't think he stressed the importance of that topic. That is a clear plus for Democrats against Republicans. Republicans are responsible for overturning, nationwide access. There's reason to think they would restrict abortion and IVF and other reproductive procedures, even contraception, nationwide if elected. And I think she will likely be very, very strong, not just on abortion, but as I say, on all the reproductive rights issues. She's been very concerned about poor performance with maternal health, too many deaths. She's spoken out on that in the past. I think we'll hear that too. Plus, just to be blunt, a woman on reproductive issues is going to be credible.
Yeah, she's also going to make efforts to protect the Affordable Care Act. Former President Trump has talked repeatedly about getting rid of the Affordable Care Act, which I think has become very popular despite its rocky start. She wanted to do that in the last campaign. We'll see. She wanted to do the combination of universal health care with the option for a private insurance. So is that a good idea? Combining the two?
Great idea. Way overdue.
Okay.
We should have basically an option of Medicare for anybody who wants to take it. That seems to be an agreed upon pretty good program. Doesn't give you everything, but it certainly cuts back administrative costs and paperwork and red tape that you have to go through with all the different private insurance. Or you could buy some private insurance as long as they offered the equivalent Medicare policy. Believe it or not, I think, Marjorie, we'd save money. We just got everybody in. I'm going to tell you a little story. Sadly, I burned my foot on some hot tiles going out to my pool, so I had to go down to the ER. And I'm in Connecticut, went to a pretty nice hospital in the Stamford, Connecticut area, and waited 9 hours.
Oh, my God. My God.
9. Now, why am I waiting? It's because as I watch, all the poor people are coming in who work in towns, not in Stamford, but around there, to get primary care because they don't have any insurance. So they're clogging up the ER. It's very expensive to see them there. To be honest, the ER isn't even really built to see people with a bad back or some kind of headache or something like that. That's their trauma place, burns and injuries. We need to fix that, and I think she should push hard to say not just we're going to give you access, but it's going to be cheaper.
Okay, Art Kaplan, we have talked to you a lot about this so-called right to try business that former President Trump talked about again at the GOP convention, claiming that thousands of lives have been saved by the so-called right to try option. Tell people what it is and why you think it's a bad idea, because I know you do.
Not only do I think it's a bad idea, I'm just going to say it flat out. I challenge Trump or any of his supporters to show me thousands, tens of thousands of people that have been helped. I don't think you can find a dozen over, 5 years. So the right to try idea was let people access drugs not approved by the FDA who can't get into a clinical trial. And that could be because you're dying, or maybe the trial got full and they're not enrolling anybody else. But you still want a chance at a drug. Both of you may remember some of this goes all the way back to AIDS, trying to give access to experimental drugs when people said, I don't have time for a trial, I'm going to die, please let me try something. So Trump said, well, I'm going to pass a law giving you that right. And then allotted no money to pay for anything and created no obligation on the part of any drug company to give anything. Well, guess what? You always had the right to ask a pharmaceutical company or a biotech company for an experimental drug, and they could decide whether or not they wanted to give it to you. His law changed nothing. It is an utter waste of time. I've seen him do this 5 or 6 times now in the past year, jump up and down about his successful right to try law. So I'll say it again. Show me more than a dozen people who have been helped by this legislation, because they're not out there.
You know what I thought when I read this art? Because I automatically assumed that he was lying about the numbers of people that were being helped, because he basically lies about everything. But there's a component of the right to try that limits liability for the companies that produce the drugs. And it also is, it's not in a direct end run around the FDA, but the two things I thought was, A, they want to tout this because it is a road toward limiting the liability for companies who produce the drugs where there's a bad outcome, and B, it's another way to not rely on an established federal agency to get something done. So that was my reaction to it.
Yeah, well, I think you're on the right track there. I do think their long-term goal, both in Project 2025 and watching the Supreme Court decision in the case that was called Chevron, which said we're going to shift authority away from FDA-type agencies and let judges decide. By the way, those are the judges who decided that mifepristone was too dangerous, even though the FDA had approved it, for 30 years on a mountain of evidence. So I'm not endorsing that shift. I think agencies do better than judges when it comes to medicine and science. But yeah, they're putting those agencies under attack. Let me point out again, the problem with a little company that has a small amount of drug and doesn't have a lot of money is that it's unlikely to give it to somebody, even if they felt bad for them, unless they get paid, because they got to make some more drugs so they can keep bringing their drug forward to ultimately get it approved for sale. So at the end of the day, if you don't budget money, you're not giving anybody a right. We like to say in ethics, you can't have rights without somebody having an obligation to fulfill those rights. There's nobody obliged to do anything under federal right to try.
We're talking to NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan.
So, Art, I guess this makes sense, but I was surprised by the study from the New York Times talking about moving in childhood contributes to depression.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that too. I mean, I talked to a lot of people, so-called, army brats and people who move around in the military all the time and get reassigned. There's plenty of people who get moved as businesses move them around into different positions. And I never heard any association between mental health for the kids. I guess in some ways it makes some sense because you're not setting deep roots with friends. You're kind of uprooting your social network, frequently. Maybe it'll be different into the future if you have social media to help you maintain ties, but the study is what it is, and it did say higher rates of depression the more you move around as a kid. I'm not sure in this day and age that's going to stop people from moving around, but it is something to watch for.
Well, they said in the story that if you moved more than once between the ages of 10 and 15, you were 61% more likely to suffer from depression. And it wasn't necessarily a rich person versus struggling person either kind of deal. It was seemed to be across the board, which was, again, I guess it makes sense, but
what I couldn't figure out, to Marjorie's point, what I couldn't figure out, Art, was the absence of, sort of discerning the reason for it. So you can be a wealthy person, but the reason you're moving is divorce. Mm-hmm. Is that the reason that it's creating the depression?
Point. That's a great question.
Yeah, or you could be...
Or you could be in my situation where my parents kept moving, but I kept managing to find them.
Despite their best efforts.
Okay. All right, Kaplan. We've talked to you about this before, Art, about elderly couples having a lot of sex, which is kind of nice, that you can stop looking at something to look forward to in your later years. You think you're like all washed up, but you're not necessarily all washed up. So tell us what you said about this dilemma in nursing homes.
This is literally, by the way, an episode of Parks and Recreation.
Oh,
they did an episode about giving this sort of education to seniors in nursing homes because they were in need of it. I'll just say it that way.
Well, I'll tell you where this comes up. It's happened to me more than once. Sometimes I do what's called an ethics consult, and I get a question from a nurse. And she says, there's a young woman here who's complaining her mom is having a relationship with somebody, either long-term care in the hospital as a patient or in a nursing home or assisted living, and she wants us to stop it. Do I have to stop it? So, I think the problem in part is with family members who sometimes don't like the older person having romance. I think that, again, many of us find it a little off-putting for cultural reasons to think that my loving granddad would still be having sex. Why? What kind of thing is that? But the reality is, while some people, may need to use Viagra or something to do it, it's around there. It brought some people back to sex life. People have romances. They think of sex as something very important in their lives. It's not for everybody, but it is for many. And they may make new relationships if they're widowed or somebody passes. And, another guy that I know who wound up in a nursing home once whispered to me he was having a great time in there because the ratio of men to women was like 1 to 10. So I don't have any problem at all with sex in nursing homes as long as consensual. You don't want people taking advantage of impaired people that can't consent. That's an issue. That's sort of non-consensual sex. That's no good. We don't want people to feel they're doing something they don't really want to do. And sometimes they may not know how to say no if they're done with sex at a certain age. And if the kids don't like it, I think we need to educate the healthcare providers to say, Mom and Dad, they've got their lives and it didn't stop because they went to the assisted living or the nursing home. And I think you might want to have a talk with them because I think you're asking, it's certainly not something that medical people or nurses are going to try and stop. That's absurd. By the way, we might even make it a little easier in Maine to have some privacy in some of these places.
Exactly. That's the question. Where do you go?
But you have to have the STD prevention.
You have to have STD prevention
component of that, and so whether the nursing home is bringing someone in, which patients' families may object to. That was the Parks and Recreation episode, is that the government was not allowed to give this education. But you need to have it.
Somebody may call somebody to come in. I don't know. Do they let them in? And then there's just the straight up, it's like college dorms. Everybody's got a roommate. So what do you do? tie your necktie around the doorknob and
well, I
don't
think,
come in here?
weren't you advocating for the sex room? Isn't that what you said in your piece?
Yes,
All right, Kathleen?
yes, some kind of private.
You have to kind
Like
of
a conjugal visit trailer?
conjugal visit
well,
trailer.
I don't know if
That's
they
right.
have to have sex, but they could be intimate or hug or cuddle or
There'll be
do
a
whatever
line
they wanna do.
outside it. You know, people can line up to go into the sex room. Then everybody will
But
know
privacy
what you're
is
doing in there.
You know, privacy is at a premium. Why? For the simple reason of legal liability. They're afraid someone's going to fall, injure themselves, so they're constantly watching, but that impairs quality of life.
Yeah, I remember the story. You hear this with Alzheimer's, which is sad, but then not so sad. I mean, Sandra Day O'Connor, she quit the Supreme Court. Remember, her husband had Alzheimer's. Then he goes to the Alzheimer's facility and falls in love, like within days of arriving. And she graciously was quite happy about it, that her husband was happy. But you hear about that, not just in places where people are dealing with Alzheimer's, but as you say, people that are just frail in their health or need extra help. I mean, I think it's very nice.
Yeah, I have no moral objection to what competent adults, choose to do just because they're a bit older.
Okay.
And
it's easier for the facility to keep people
Something
apart.
to look forward to, Andrea.
Yes.
You know what I mean? When we get the time comes.
Well, eventually, I'm sure that eventually what will happen is that someone will create a nursing home that is geared to that. Like
That's
now
right.
you have pet hotels or hotels that are pet friendly. There's a niche market for everything.
That's right.
They will begin to build
That's
facilities that encourage romantic relationships, accept couples, and all of that other
The
kind
Hot
of
to
stuff.
Trot Seniors Home.
Yeah,
So Marjorie's already found a name for it.
Isn't there a website called Hinge? It'll be like Rusty Hinge.
Yeah, where is your mom? She's over at the Hot to Trot. That'll go over really big. That'll be good.
Okay. All right, thank you
Thank
very
you, Art.
much.
It's always a pleasure.
Thanks.
We've been speaking with medical ethicist Art Kaplan. He's the doctors William F. and Virginia Conley Mitty Professor and founding head of the Division of the Medical Ethics at NYU School of Medicine in New York City. Up next, we're going to open the phone lines to get your thoughts on the world we enter when we fall asleep, our dreams. How much of our internal lives should we share with others? What do you do when you have a dream about someone you love and they behave badly? Do you wake up mad and hold a grudge? Call 877-301-8970 next. You're listening to Boston Public.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Michael C. Thorpe. He went from shooting hoops to quilting loops. A basketball star at Emerson College, he traded in his athletic ambitions for artistic pursuits. Now an accomplished artist whose quilts are bold, vibrant, and stitched to create scenes of everyday life, he joins us to talk about his solo exhibition at the Fuller Craft Museum. That and more today on The Culture Show at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the Peabody Essex Museum, where visitors can experience art and culture in real life. Escape the algorithm. You can see what's happening this week at PEM.org. And Eversource, committed to helping businesses reach sustainability goals and lower their energy use through energy assessments and custom recommendations. Learn more at eversource.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy is off today. Andrew Cabral is in. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I love this audience.
I know,
They're
aren't they great?
They're very nice. Okay, so we're going to end this show by tapping into our subconscious and asking you about your dreams. Periods of stress or anxiety can impact dreams. Remember during the pandemic, people were collectively dreaming about insects, a physical manifestation of the COVID-19 bug. And we've probably all had the unsettling dream. I haven't had this one where your teeth fall out. I guess this is very
loss of
common.
control.
Yeah, teeth falling out or falling or being chased or dying. We all have these, a lot of us have recurring dreams. But have you ever had a dream that stays with you well into your waking day? Maybe a loved one was mean to you and you wake up feeling hurt, or even an unsettling premonition that sets you off kilter for the rest of the day. The number is 877-301-8970, 877-301-8970. How much of your dreaming world do you remember and take seriously as something to reflect on, like a message from your most inner self? You know, we decided to talk about this because of a story in The Guardian about a person who dreamed their best friend was gossiping about them in the dream. So we had a relevant clip here from the TV show Flight of the Conchords, a comedy about two...
Have you ever seen Flight of the Conchords?
No, I'm going to start watching it after this, though.
This is it's Jermaine Clement. For people who watch What We Do in the Shadows, or either saw the movie What We Do in the Shadows or watched the show, it's the Jermaine Clement from that show. He's the writer of What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show. But here he did a show for HBO with Brett McKechnie. They're from New Zealand. It is a hilarious show.
It is?
And this clip is them and their single fan. The band is called Flight of the Conchords, and this is their single fan who they're talking to.
Okay, so here it is. As Andrea said, Flight of the Conchords, two struggling musicians trying to make it in New York. In this scene, the band's lone superfan asking for an apology for the way one of them behaved in a dream she had the night before.
I'm kind of angry at you for something that you did in my dream last night. Yeah, you were there too, Jermaine, but you did something very nice.
Oh, that's nice.
But Brett, I feel like it's silly, but you should apologize for what you did.
Apologize for what? What did he do? Oh my God, what was the nice thing that I did? Oh.
So she wanted him to apologize for what he actually didn't do because it was in her dream.
Because they feel so real. Dreams feel so real.
I guess he's not the only person. So our number is 877-301-8970. Do you apologize to people for things you did in their dream, unbeknownst to you? And do you have these recurring dreams that you remember? Do you have recurring dreams?
There are some that are recurring. I am one of those people who doesn't always, it's tough for me to remember. I know that I've dreamt something, but it's tough for me to remember. I will say I have actually, awakened and been angry and try to figure out why. And then you realize it was because of something that you just dreamed and that you're kind of mad at whoever it was. And then if you can remember, so I think that is real. Like you can, you really... That carries over into at least the opening minutes of your waking life. You may let go of it later on. But people dream all kinds of stuff too. I mean, there are people, we were talking earlier about people who have dreams that are almost like premonitions, right? Mm-hmm. So around horrific world events like the Twin Towers coming down and things like that, people talked about having dreams about specific people who ended up being in the towers that day and dying, and dreaming that something terrible was going to happen to them, or dreaming that a catastrophic event was going to happen. And it really is about, whether you pay attention to them or you don't. And if you've ignored them and the bad thing has happened, what happens then?
Okay, we got some calls on this. Desiree in Jamaica Plain. What do you think, Desiree?
Hey, I dream about Donald Trump winning the election 3 months before he went.
No. Desiree.
I wake up lying in tears, and my husband says, "Oh, don't worry, honey, that's never going to happen."
Well.
Desiree, you're not the only one who thought it could never happen. Paul from Worcester says something similar. He says, half the country wakes up every morning hoping Trump was just a bad dream, and then it's back to the waking nightmare. And Aaron from Auburn says, my fiance once woke me up to tell me she was mad at me for cheating on him in his dream. I told him to go back to sleep, so I can apologize.
I think that is very common. Like that, the dream about being cheated on is very common, and I think people do wake up mad and kind of are like, you wouldn't believe what you did in my dream. But I also question whether or not you subconsciously suspect that your person is cheating on you, and that's why it ends up, it manifests itself in your dream.
877-301-8970 is the number about dreaming. Kate in Westport, what do you think,
Hi, Kate.
Good afternoon. I'm calling to say I'm a prolific dreamer. Is there an echo? I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Oh, it might be the...
Yeah.
I have recurring dreams. I'm on my Bluetooth.
Oh, that's maybe it. Maybe a speaker.
Yeah, speaker.
Do you want me to take it off?
Yes.
Okay, I will do that.
Thank you. Try again. Try again, Kate. We're waiting for Kate.
Yeah. Okay, here I am.
Okay. Much better. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. I am a prolific dreamer. I dream on a recurring basis, the same dream. I dream the same setting
most of which I've never seen before in my life, which really I find interesting. And I dream in complete stories. I write for a living, and I think somehow or another, maybe I'm writing in my dreams. I don't know. But, on the Art Kaplan piece where you're talking about depression for kids who've moved in childhood, when I was young, I had a dream after we moved from Massachusetts to Connecticut where I was walking home from school, and the crossing guard said to me, "I'm so sorry, your parents have moved." And I couldn't find them.
Wow.
Wow. And that recurs even as a grown-up?
No, it doesn't. But
okay.
I did have it several times when I was a kid, and I'll never forget it because I was always so distraught about it.
And they never did that to you, Kate,
No,
right?
no,
but that could
No,
be a
of course
fear of
not.
abandonment.
Fear of
they
abandonment.
Still have me, in fact.
Yes, fear of abandonment is a big one, and loss of control is a big one. Kate, thank you for the call.
Thanks
you for
the
coming
call,
on.
Kate.
The speakerphone. I have a recurring dream about being unprepared. I've had that since I was a kid. Go to take a test, I haven't studied. I used to play the piano, go to perform somewhere, I forgot the piece. The other day, we were supposed to do the show at 4 o'clock in the afternoon if Trump dropped out. And then on the way home, I left really early to get home in time for the show, and then the traffic was terrible and I was stuck. That morning, Sunday morning, before I knew Biden was going to drop out, I had a dream about not being able to get to the radio station on time for the show, and then I couldn't get to the radio station on time for the show about 4 hours later. What do you make of that?
Is that a fear of being unprepared or a fear of embarrassment?
Oh,
like
it's
generally?
a fear of embarrassment.
Oh, okay.
Of getting there, get up on a stage to perform a piece,
right,
and not remembering it, because I used to play piano when I was a kid. I mean, that's like the worst, right? You can't remember your piece. What do you do?
That one, I have had the teeth falling out one, the lack of control one. But yeah, I mean, I was fascinated by Kate's phone call because she said she dreams constantly, and she dreams in full stories. Like usually when you wake up, you got fragments, right? That's sort of the nature of dreams.
And you're really relieved it didn't happen.
And the story that we were talking about waking up, the piece that was in The Guardian, they also talked about the study that was done in the 40s and 50s, where people, when television was in black and white, said that they dreamed in black and white. And then once color television became popular, they began to dream in color, which makes no sense to me because you see your real life in color. Why would you only dream in black and white? But the people in the study said they dreamt in black and white and not in color before color television. And that was the point they were trying to make, was that your external world has an impact on your dreams. But that seems weird to me.
Eden from Nahant.
Hi, Eden.
Hi.
We're ready.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I, many years ago, woke up very suddenly in the middle of the night, having gotten punched in the back of the head by my boyfriend, who was asleep, and having a dream about getting into a fight.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
So it was terrifying. He just wrapped his arms around me and apologized immediately. I couldn't go back to sleep. I was terrified, and I think I went and slept on the couch because he immediately fell back to sleep. And, yeah.
Did that ever happen again?
No.
Did you stay with the boyfriend or ditch him?
I stayed with him for a while. I'm not with him anymore.
Oh, okay.
Married to
Did he
someone else.
remember the dream or tell you what, any sort of memory of what, how the fight started? And if he's not violent with you, why it escalated to that in his dream?
He was never violent with me. He did tell me a few details about the dream. They're very fuzzy because this was many, many years ago, but it's something I will never forget.
That is jarring, I will say. I would have slept on the couch, too.
Okay. Thank you for the call, Eden. Nancy from Situate says, I have a recurring dreams about my brakes failing on a steep hill and going down the hill backwards. It is very scary. There are a lot of people who have these recurring dreams. We have a little clip of Amy Poehler, her recurring dream from Saturday Night Live, and describing an anxiety dream. Here that is.
Fred, I'm late for work.
Oh, I'm not Fred. I'm a security guard.
and everyone is mad at you.
Oh my God. Oh no. Nassim, why are you in my Caitlyn costume? Guess what? I'm Caitlyn now. What? Justin!
Do you wanna rehearse our kissing scene, or?
Yes, I would love to.
You're a terrible kisser!
Lord!
Well, Amy, all you need to do is relax because you're in a dream.
That was pretty good, too.
Well, you said before we came out the air, we were talking about it, you said, why, what about those dreams where you dream that you're, falling, but you wake up just before you hit?
Yeah.
Just like, we call them dying dreams, right? Because you're going to die. And she said, you always wake up just before you hit. And I said, how do you know that the people who don't wake up, they would all be dead? So, you don't always wake up. Sometimes you die in the dream, but you're not, because you die, you can't wake up and tell people that you hit bottom.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Those are scary, though.
Those are very scary. Those are very scary, and you're so relieved when you wake up. Somebody texted and said, my husband told me I tried to murder him in his dream, 3 separate dreams. Then they stopped. He was very upset. We talked and laughed nervously about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that conversation was probably real comfortable. Let's talk to Lauren in Marblehead. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, ladies. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for calling.
Sure thing. So two quick things. One is that I had this extraordinary teacher in high school. I think it was a psychology class. And he explained that all of us dream. And I forget exactly now, it's been a while, but during certain sections of our sleep state, we all dream.
REM states.
And if you're looking to, right, in your REM. And if you're looking to remember your dreams better, then while you're waking up and you're sort of in that gray space, try to not think about your day yet, to sort of get into that space. And then as you remember things, keep a little notebook next to your bed and write them down.
Oh, yeah.
And that helps. The other thing is my lovely, sweet, adorable mom that I recently lost was an identical twin. And you could not get anything by that girl. But she was very intuitive, very intuitive. And she'd have dreams or premonitions, but one specific dream she had was she woke up in the morning and said, I'm really worried about Priscilla, one of my sisters. I dreamed that she got into a car accident with her truck last night.
Oh.
And we couldn't call her. Right. We couldn't call her because it was before cell phones, and she lives in a teepee out in the woods. Seriously. So before we left for the day, phone rang. And my sister Priscilla said, hey, just want to let you know, Mom and Dad, I got into a car accident with my truck last night.
Wow.
Powerful stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people have
for
that.
The call.
I think a lot of people have a little element of clairvoyance or prescience or whatever you want to call it. And I think, a lot of times we ignore it, but I think it's there.
Listen to this one. I often have a dream I have multiple pieces of gum in my mouth, and I'm chewing and chewing and chewing, and I just can't get them out. I try so hard to get them out, and they won't come out, and that is a recurring dream. I love that one.
That is good. That is good.
And here's somebody else who says, I dream about forgetting my locker combo, and I realize I forgot to go to history class, and it's halfway through the year. Getting locked out of the house. I've had dreams about that. I'm locked out of the house. I can't get in. I'm knocking on the door, and no one can hear me.
It's worse if there are people inside who can hear you knocking and they won't let you in. Then I think you get some real problems.
That happens to Jim, and I understand. Erica. Erica and Beverly, thanks for calling.
Oh, hi. Nice to talk to you. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
So I actually just listened to a podcast called Science Versus, and they had an episode called Science Versus Dreams, and they've done experiments, and they've proven that during a dream, the region of your brain that experiences, emotion and lights up when you have, intense emotions, that region of your brain lights up in the same exact way when you're dreaming than when you're during the waking world. So those feelings you get when you, wake up and you are angry or something really awesome happened and you wake up, you genuinely, you literally, your brain those synapses or what have you went off. Like you actually experienced it.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It does. And we know so little still about how all of the brain works.
Yeah, that's a great, Erica, thank you very much for that call. We're almost out of time here, but here's a quick text. And I think this happens a lot. This is not a recurrent dream, this person said, but I had one where a friend won the lottery and gave me some money, and I was so happy about it. This is from Fred from Rentham. So happy about it, and I felt so bad when I woke up because it felt so real, and actually I hadn't won any of the money. That's a pretty good one. I've had those too, when something really great happens and you wake up and you find out it's not true. Okay, we are done. We are done.
I like this ending segment. This was pretty good.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the calls and texts. Sorry we didn't get to them
We
all.
appreciate it very, very much. I loved being here with you, Marjorie, as always. Tomorrow we're back in Brighton.
Back in Brighton, yes we are.
Thanks for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Keep up with us 24/7. And thank you to this audience. It's been absolutely fantastic.
It's been great.
Keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. Check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tune in tomorrow. We'll have NBC's Chuck Todd, GBH's Philip Martin, and academic Khalil Gibran Muhammad, Boston Globe's Marcela Garcia, our food policy analyst Corby Kummer, and NPR TV critic Eric Deggans. Our wonderful crew is Zoe Matthews, Aidan Connolly, Nicole Garcia, and Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to our library staff, Cullen Cockrell, Patrick Lally, Juan Jose Cadena, and Amanda Francis. Thanks too to our hosts at the Newsfeed Cafe and the folks across the street at the Lenox Hotel. Stay tuned for the Culture Show with Jared Bowen, starting right after the 2 o'clock news here on GBH 89.7 FM.
Thanks, Andrea, for being here today, and thanks to everybody that came down to the library and all the people that listened. We'll be back tomorrow. See you later.